The hidden human senses. Welcome to my channel Galaxies and Goodnights again. No matter where you are on the globe, whether you're cuddled up on a couch, I'm happy you're here, couch. I would want to know where you are tuning in from and what time it is before we start. You? Is it early in the morning, late at night, or somewhere lovely in between? Feel free to post it in the comments section below. And if you like to calmly and gradually float into the realm of science, a like and a subscribe would mean the world to someone with an inquisitive mind. It is beneficial. The channel expands and informs the algorithm that science and sleep do, in fact, get along well. Now, for tonight's subject may simply be inquisitive enough to keep you up a bit later than you had intended. I truly apologize if that occurs for the inconvenience of learning something by accident. I'll try my best to blend being interesting with and a little drowsy, but no guarantees. Most likely, you've heard of sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing. However, those are only the main performers. Below them is entire orchestra of more subdued sensations. Similar to how, even when your eyes are closed, you can always locate your arms and legs. Or how your inner ear alerts you to impending collapse, your cheeks flush, or your stomach growls. These are neither subliminal whispers nor magical abilities. These are natural functions of the human body. In the background, constantly there, and hardly noticed unless something goes wrong. Thus, this evening, we will take exploration of those latent human senses in a leisurely and serene manner. The ones you may not consider, but make the most of daily. Imagine it like a stroll through the quiet back corridors of your own neurological system. No obligation to staying up for it all. After all, even when the intellect is absent, the body is capable of caring for itself. And last but not least, even if tonight's investigation is grounded on scientific inquiry, its goals are relaxation and education only. This video does not contain any medical advice. If you have any health concerns, always consult a trained physician. If you're prepared, let's start in silence. There was a time when 2300 Aristotle was a man who lived a long time ago, give or take a philosophical scroll. He might be familiar to you. He had several significant concepts. He was interested in logic, poetry, ethics, biology, and presumably sensory awareness. After examining the universe, he concluded that people have 5 senses: taste, smell, hearing, and sight, and make contact. That's all. 5 ways to view reality in a tidy package. No more, not less, tidy, easy, and extremely ancient Greek. Amazingly, that number remained. It journeyed through time, found its way into Renaissance classrooms, through medieval manuscripts, and found a place in contemporary educational textbooks. Many of us are still taught as kids that we have only those 5. It's a reassuring notion. Simple to learn, simple to enumerate, and aesthetically pleasingly organized. 5 fingers make up the hand. 5 senses are available to us. Symmetry. However, it turns out to be deliciously imperfect, as is the case with many neat concepts from antiquity. Since the truth is that the human anatomy is much more complex than that. Sure, Aristotle was a genius, but had no access to lab rats, nerve maps, or brain scans. He was unaware of the spinal cord's internal mechanisms. Cord, or how standing up straight is aided by fluid sloshing around in your ears. He didn't understand why you feel the weight of your own burden, or how nervousness causes your stomach to turn. Arm, even when it's dark. These are also actual, quantifiable, profound sensations. Significant ones, however, they are not included in the traditional 5. So why is this how long did the 5 sense notion last? Historical inertia is one factor. When an idea is repeated enough, it becomes ingrained. Textbooks were embraced by school systems. Repeated, and it had already become common sense by the time someone had the idea to update the list. We prefer short, manageable categories because that is part of our culture. It's simpler to create engaging lesson ideas and visuals. with 5 pieces as opposed to, say, 17. Indeed, according to some academics, we possess a minimum of 17 different senses. Some people extend the list into their 20s. Everything based on your definition of a sense. Is it a particular type of receptor or something special? Neural pathway, experience that is conscious? The details are debated among scientists. However, one thing is for sure. The number 5 is only the beginning. Consider balance 4, for example. Most of the time you're not aware of it, yet without your vestibular system, small structures in you would continually topple over due to your inner ear's ability to detect motion and orientation. It's not physical contact. It's not sight. It is an independent system that silently assists you in the background. Travel over space, or think about suffering. Touch is frequently used to lump it in. However, that would be like referring to smoke as a type of breeze. When you feel something touching your flesh, you know it's happening. Pain is a sign that something is amiss. Anguish has its own nociceptors, which have specialized nerve endings. They can identify heat, injury, pressure, hormones, and communicate urgently with the brain by sending messages up your spinal cord. It's not nice, but vital. You wouldn't know when to remove your hand from a hot stove if you didn't feel pain. Temperature comes next. Sensation being touched isn't the only way to determine whether something is hot or cold. It has to do with energy detection. Your skin and body have specific thermal receptors that detect temperature changes, both externally and internally. That cold shiver down your spine, though not one of the traditional 5, it has a strong sense. Another silent one is stretch. Contributor. Specialized sensors in your muscles and tendons continuously measure length and tension. These keep you from overstretching, assist you in coordinating your motions, and guard against injury. Every time you reach for anything on a high shelf, you can thank them without exerting much effort, or at least the majority of the moment. Perhaps the most underappreciated of these is body position, or proprioception, as scientists refer to it. It's the ability to touch your nose with your finger while closing your eyes. That's why you don't have to look at while you walk your feet. There are receptors deep within your muscles and joints that provide your brain with continuous information concerning the location of your limbs. Your body's map is constantly updated moment by moment without your knowledge. Give up on even the most basic activity. Turns into a deliberate endeavor. There is also interception. The awareness of what's taking place within your body. Are you hungry? Does your heart beat quickly? Do you have to go to the restroom? Do you breathe deeply enough? Each of these your brain receives sensations through a sophisticated network of internal senses. They don't show up at the end of either the surface of your skin or your tongue, yet they are essential to your survival and health. The classic 5 senses start to resemble a greatest hits album when you start to tally everything up. Well-liked, unforgettable, but not really the complete story. The complete sensory image is far more vast, multi-layered, and subtly remarkable. Furthermore, it's not only about possessing additional senses. It's about how your sense of being human is shaped by these lesser-known ones. They assist you. Navigate the environment, stay safe, maintain your composure, recognize feelings, and keep your identity intact. They are the crew that works behind the scenes to keep the entire show going smoothly. It's interesting to note that not all of these senses result in strong conscious experiences. You don't always, unless you pay attention to it, you won't sense your correct reception. Usually, you don't consider your balance until it is upset. Nevertheless, they are as important, equally active, and equally genuine. That's the portion of what conceals them. Unnoticed, yet not invisible. Naturally, we continue to utilize the traditional 5 senses each day. The senses of taste, touch, smell, sound, and sight are all vibrant, and they are the opening act, yet they are immediate. Below them, a complex hums. symphony of additional, more subdued, but equally significant messages. A certain amount of humility results from understanding how a large portion of your experience depends on factors you never consider. The body in its wisdom takes care of the intricacies, saving you the trouble. However, as soon as you begin to notice the specifics, the tiny signals, stretches, balances, and pulses, it gives you a fresh perspective on how incredibly complex you truly are. Therefore, although Aristotle provided us with a beautiful framework, our current understanding of the senses is much more sophisticated. What we refer to as the concealed senses are merely obscured from general attention, not from science. And as you start to notice them, even in a subtle way, the inner world becomes as fascinating as the outer world. Imagine being in a pitch-black room with eyes closed, extending your hand to touch your nose tip. You don't miss. You don't must look around your face as if you were playing an odd game of hide-and-seek while wearing a blindfold. You simply know where your nose and hand are, and your body connects them with a kind of silent, imperceptible choreography. This seemingly straightforward deed is actually a fantastic illustration of proprioception as a secret superpower. Your brain's internal sense of proprioception is GPS for your body. This sense informs you about the position of your limbs in space, their motion, and the amount of effort required. You don't have to look to see how your muscles are being used. As opposed to hearing or vision, which depend on inputs from the proprioception, is completely internal to the outside world. It's how your body works. A monitoring itself. The word's Latin root is proprius, which means one's own perspective of significance. Therefore, appropriate reception is essentially the view of oneself, but not in a poetic existential sense, but rather in a my the foot is a little to the right and behind me. If this sense has never occurred to you previously, that's most likely because it is so dependable. It continuously operates in the background, informing your brain of your bodies. Think of it as a weather app that never breaks. Before taking a step, you don't need to consider bending your knee or repositioning your hand to hold a cup. You simply do it. Proprioception, unless anything goes wrong, is magnificently forgettable. Your muscles include specialized sensors that are at the core of proprioception. Tendons as well as joints. Muscle spindles are among them. They can identify variations in muscle length and the organs of the Golgi tendon, which track tension. These sensors continuously provide information to your brain via the spinal cord, particularly to the cerebellum, which is essential for perfecting balance and mobility. It's similar to having a biomechanical backstage crew, technicians that are on duty all day and all night. In plainer language, proprioception is how your body locates everything without having to urinate. If the conductor of a symphony is your brain, proprioception is how, even in the event that the lights go out, it can still locate all of the instruments. There are a few iconic instances that demonstrate the system's remarkable capabilities. A popular party trick is to touch your nose while closing your eyes. For everyone's inner neuroscientist, the ability to move along a corridor at night without running into the walls is your steps are guided by your proprioception. Typing without glancing at a keyboard. Proprioception, too. Scratching your back is a casual activity that depends on your brain's comprehension of movement coordination and spatial location. Naturally, proprioception is not perfect in everyone. Congratulations if you've ever slammed your elbow into an unexpected door frame or stumbled over your own foot. You discovered the boundaries of your own GPS. And if you're curious about how we compare to animals in this area, let me introduce the gold standard for cats. For want of a better term, cats are smugly graceful. They move through small areas by leaping, twisting, landing, and slinking with a grace that verges on magic. They have extraordinary proprioceptive abilities. Have you ever seen a cat jump from a scarcely moving on the landing from a countertop to a windowsill? Proprioception is in expert mode at that point. Coffee tables that haven't moved in 3 years are where we humans stub our toes in the interim. Among the most extreme instances, rare neurological conditions cause people to nearly lose their sense of what happens when adequate reception fails. Completely. One man called Ian Waterman is known to have lost all of his reproductive abilities. Feedback from the neck down as a result of his sensory nerves being compromised by a viral illness. He lost the ability to sense where, unless he looked at them directly, his limbs were. Walking evolved into a purposeful, incredibly visual activity, and even it took a lot of focus to do anything like buttoning a shirt. He needed to relearn how to move by using internal feedback vision. It serves as a potent reminder of how vital this feeling is to day-to-day existence. The ability to teach and improve proprioception is another fascinating fact. Dancers, athletes, and martial artists' body awareness is crucial for all artists. Dancers, for example, execute mid-air flips with precise landing technique, mostly using proprioceptive cues. Similarly, equilibrium and exercises to improve this sensation are frequently included in mobility therapy, particularly following neurological or trauma. Even Tai Chi and yoga, which are frequently linked to relaxation, are cunning exercises for proprioception. Maintaining a posture, changing your weight, and recognizing you're all of it uses this subtle body mapping method, including alignment. When people remark they feel more in tune with their bodies after engaging in such activities, they're frequently alluding to increased awareness of proprioception. It's interesting to note that alcohol might momentarily confuse the perception that unsteady gait and an inability to determine how far your face is from the entrance frame. That's the internal GPS in your brain. Slipping out. Due to the close relationship between proprioception and coordination, even a minor disturbance can make motion seem awkward or disjointed. However, proprioception is not an isolated process. It frequently joins forces with the other senses to provide your brain with a more comprehensive image of your body in space. Hearing, touch, vision, and even balance participate in this awareness symphony. However, proprioception is unique in that it functions even in the lack of outside assistance. It makes you feel like you own your body, of control and continuity. You know where you are because of that. A few proprioception, according to academics, is also a component of the basis for more intricate ideas like self-awareness. Your body is more than just a place you live in. Without having to look, you can sense it from the inside out. That feeling that one is somewhere, and that one's own location is characterized by limbs and movement is closely related to this unseen feedback mechanism. It's important to recognize how beautifully all of this works. Every action you take, your movements are tracked and directed by a large, silent network of sensors. Neurons. As you reach for a glass of water, tilt your head, or shift beneath your cover, it's happening right now. The sensory conversation you're engaging in started long before you were born and will go on long after you go to sleep this evening. Furthermore, although cats may still outstrip us in terms of beautiful landings, humans have something quite as amazing. We would be adrift without a whole sense that we almost ever notice. It's not ostentatious, and neither look nor sound will win any popularity contest. However, it's constantly keeping you upright, coordinated, and incredibly silently aware of your surroundings. Your body has a silent language that is not expressed through words, images, or even a lot of noise. It's the tightness of your heartbeat and its murmur. The gradual expanding of your lungs as you take a deep breath in your stomach before meals. These are not ideas. These are internal messages, sensations. This quiet flow of physical interoception is a wonderful sense that enables awareness. Your capacity to sense your body's interior condition is known as interception. Proprioception, however, indicates where your interception reveals how things are going inside while the limbs are in space. Are you feeling peckish? Is your bladder full? Do you feel hot or cold? Is your heart pounding? Are you breathing too quickly or not enough? All of these are instances of interceptive consciousness. Your brain is continuously updated by your internal dashboard with current details regarding the state of your tissues, fluids, and organs without requesting your consent or involvement. Without knowing its name, you felt this sensation innumerable times. That dry tickling in your throat that tells you to take a drink of water. Interception. Butterflies in your tummy prior to a significant occasion. Once more, interception. Even your consciousness of exhaustion following a demanding day or the sigh of satisfaction following a filling dinner. All those are messages from inside. A stunningly intricate network of sensory neurons at the core of interception keeps an eye on circumstances inside the body. Your heart, lungs, stomach, bladder, muscles, and skin all contain these receptors. They transmit information to the brain through nerves, particularly the vagus nerve, where it is processed in different parts. The insular cortex, for example, one of the main brain regions for creating a comprehensive image of the body's interior environment. Your gut tells you, yes, my stomach is making that noise again. It's interesting to note that interoception doesn't always demand notice. Actually, it murmurs most of the time. It's not overt. Although the indications are present, they seldom reach the point of complete awareness unless a substantial change occurs, such as unexpected pain, intense hunger, or the pressing need to use the restroom. Interception is mostly a background noise, keeping your mind informed without making a big deal out of it. It's not always unimportant, though, just because it's quiet. Actually, interception is essential for controlling homeostasis, the internal equilibrium that maintains everything is running smoothly. Your body sends hunger signals to your brain when your blood sugar falls. When sweating occurs when your body temperature rises. When you are under stress and your heart rate increases, interception helps you. Acknowledge the shift and try to relax. In the absence of this mechanism, you would be a little like a car that doesn't have dashboard lights but is still operating and doesn't know when it needs maintenance. The way interception connects the mind and body is among its more intriguing features. In the case of emotions, are intricately linked with signals that can be intercepted. That pounding pulse when you're anxious, that lump in the throat during despair, and a racing stomach at excitement. These are more than only metaphors. Your brain interprets these bodily experiences as emotional feelings. Indeed, some emotions, according to psychologists, start as interceptive experiences, and our thoughts just label them later. When your body changes, your brain recognizes it and goes, must be anxious, or this is a happy feeling. This brain-body cycle is both bidirectional and continuous. Your mind receives information from your body, and it can and then affect your body. It can make your tummy knot when you think about anything stressful. Breathing more slowly can reduce your heart rate. It's a sophisticated feedback mechanism that permits control, flexibility, and self-knowledge. Additionally, the more adept you are at detecting small changes in mood, vitality, and health. However, different people have different experiences with interoception. Some individuals are extremely sensitive to their internal cues. They can identify the first signs of dehydration, pick up on minute variations in heartbeat, or as they start, emotions shift. Others are not as aware. In certain and severe situations, individuals may even completely lose awareness of their inner moods, which makes it challenging to acknowledge their feelings of hunger, exhaustion, and emotional overload. Conversely, on the extreme end of the scale, some persons have overwhelming levels of heightened interception. For instance, people with anxiety disorders could be extremely conscious of their breathing or pulse rate, which might create ordinary feelings seem frightening. What most people would consider a speeding heart could feel like a full-blown crisis. The signal is amplified and misinterpreted, and a feedback cycle that becomes distressing. It can be beneficial to comprehend interception. Elucidate why mindfulness exercises can be so beneficial for certain people and why certain people feel more in their bodies than others. Efficient in reducing nervous system tension. Specifically, breath is one of the most potent entrances into interception. Breathing is both automatic and controllable, in contrast to the majority of body functions. You can take charge at any moment, but you can also breathe mindlessly. It is the ideal anchor because of this special quality. For consciousness, interoceptive sensitivity can be increased by concentrating on the breath, soothe the nervous system, and give one a feeling of stability. Not surprisingly, almost all contemplative or meditative tradition calls for focusing on the breath. That's the nearest thing we need a manual override button for the internal rhythm of the body. Interception plays an important part in the stages of growth as well. Babies start creating an internal model from birth of their bodies by detecting feelings of fullness, pain, and hunger. These feelings develop throughout time and become more complex, incorporating emotional states. Children benefit from having interceptive awareness as they get older. Be able to tell when they're tired, angry, or experiencing a bodily issue. It's not only about identifying a growling stomach. It involves relating physical feelings to ideas, actions, and self-care. Recently, scientists have started investigating interception in connection to neurological and mental health issues. For instance, individuals on the differences in interceptive processing are common in the autism spectrum, and they can impact emotional control and physical consciousness. Likewise, people who suffer from eating disorders or depression may have interfered with interceptive signals, causing erroneous impressions of emotion, hunger, or exhaustion. Gaining knowledge of and proficiency in interoceptive techniques may provide fresh approaches to promoting well-being and self-control throughout a broad variety of circumstances. However, even when there are no clinical issues, developing interception can be a strong instrument for standing alone. It involves quietly tuning in, carefully to the inner workings of things. It is the awareness of your heartbeat while you are motionless. It's recognizing that you're more worn out than you anticipated. It's the ability to distinguish between boredom and actual hunger. It's the interior. Whispers suggesting that you might want to get some fresh air or drink another cup of there was probably no need for coffee. Furthermore, although this sensation might not be as striking as sight or hearing, it's just as vital. You may even say that it's among the most fundamental senses of all, as it provides you with a real feeling of being, and a body means experiencing it rather than merely occupying it. It's what makes embodied life into a biological machine. Although you might not hear it frequently, interception is a constant voice. Additionally, once you master listening, even a little, it can provide you with some incredibly helpful information. Spend a moment sitting as still as possible. Your body is juggling a symphony of messages to keep you upright even when you're in this relaxed position. You're not going to topple over. You haven't thought much about the invisible systems, and your head isn't swaying, that are silently bringing this about. Your inner ears are one of the most important actors behind the scenes. Indeed, the two tiny your skull's deep-seated, coiled structures are doing much more than just making sounds. They're also assisting you don't get up from your seat. Each ear contains a little, amazing system in charge of your sense of equilibrium. The vestibular system is what enables you to move about in a walk in a straight line, stand on one foot, or cross a rug's corner with grace without falling over like a bewildered giraffe. Although we frequently attribute these accomplishments to our strength or vision, a large portion of this lesser-known fluid-filled wonder is the source of balance magic. Fundamentally, the semicircular canals and the otolith organs are the two primary parts of the vestibular system. Don't allow the name to frighten you. You might be surprised at how simple they are to visualize. The semicircular canals come first. Consider 3 small curving tubes, one for each of the primary head movement directions, up and down, loosely like the rings of a gyroscope, tilt, and from side to side. Endolymph is the fluid that fills these channels, and dotted with microscopic movement-detecting, hair-like cells. When you relocate your head, shake it in shock, or nod in agreement, the fluid changes within these channels cause the tiny hairs to bend, which then communicate with your brain by sending electrical impulses that indicate, hey, we're moving. This is how your brain determines your direction, speed, and rotation, and how you move in addition to the fact that you moved. It's Otney hair cells with liquid physics to power a real-time navigation system. Your brain incorporates this information with cues from your muscles and eyes to help you stay focused. It updates continuously, even while you're simply glancing out the window to observe a squirrel. Next are the otolith organs, which are identical to enjoyable to think about. These are tiny organs known as the saccule and utricle. They have a sense of gravity and linear acceleration, which indicates to your brain whether you're moving forward at a constant speed, tilting, or standing still. Similar to a car's takeoff. Tiny crystals known as otoconia are floating in a jelly-like fluid inside these organs. Gravity pulls on these crystals, causing them to move slightly when you move or tilt your head. Nearby hair is bent by the movement. Cells which communicate with your brain once more. In between the otoliths and the canals, your brain receives a real-time report about where your head is in 3 dimensions. Additionally, because your head is securely fastened to your body, perhaps this constant flow of direction can help the rest of you. Information. However, what occurs if the system is disrupted? Oh, lightheadedness. That most of us have at some point encountered this confusing, spinning feeling. Whirling in circles as a youngster was enjoyable because it safely and predictably interfered with the vestibular system. However, the when you stop and the world continues to spin is your inner ear telling your brain, we're still in motion. Although your eyes don't agree, this sensory discrepancy gives the impression that motion and makes you feel lightheaded. What you're going through at those times is a sort of transient rebellion between your senses. Following the spin, your semicircular canals are continuously sloshing around and communicating motion, while a motionless reality is reported by your visual system. As the slightly dramatic interpreter that it is, your brain says, well, I don't know what's going on, but let's feel weird about it. This tactile sensation motion sickness is also rooted in disagreement. Imagine reading a book while driving. Your eyes are focused on the page. There is no movement. However, every bump, curve, and acceleration is sensed by your vestibular system. A brain that is torn between contradicting messages is the end outcome. And according to evolutionary theory, this kind of sensory discrepancy might have been explained as poison interfering with perception. Hence the nausea. Your body thinks it's being tricked and tries to clear the decks. It's a bit overprotective. On the flip side, looking out the window in a moving car helps align your visual cues with the motion your inner ear feels. Suddenly, your senses agree. Yes, we're definitely moving. And your brain relaxes. This is why some people swear by staring at the horizon when they're queasy. Vertigo, a more persistent form of dizziness, often arises from disruptions in the vestibular system itself. Tiny calcium crystals can dislodge and float into one of the semicircular canals where they don't belong. This condition, called benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, or BPV for short, can make lying down or rolling over in bed feel like the room is spinning. Thankfully, there are physical maneuvers that can help reposition these stray crystals, kind of like gently shaking a snow globe until the flakes settle again. The vestibular system can also be affected by inflammation, infections, or injury. People with vestibular neuritis, for example, experience sudden, intense vertigo due to swelling of the vestibular nerve. It's disorienting, exhausting, and can last for days. Your brain tries to compensate, but like an office worker trying to run things without the internet, it struggles when information from the inner ear suddenly goes silent. On a day-to-day basis, most people don't consciously notice their vestibular system working, but its effects are everywhere. When you reach down without falling over, when you walk across uneven ground, when you balance on one foot just for fun, even maintaining an upright posture while sitting still is a quiet dance between gravity and inner ear guidance. And for those who engage in activities that push the boundaries of balance, acrobats, figure skaters, astronauts, the vestibular system becomes a trained partner. In space, for instance, astronauts often experience space motion sickness during their first few days in zero gravity. Without gravity to anchor the otolith organs, the brain has to adapt to a whole new set of rules. Fortunately, the human brain is wonderfully adaptable, and most astronauts adjust within a few days. There's also some evidence that we can improve our vestibular awareness through practice. Balance exercises, yoga, tai chi, and certain forms of physical therapy can all enhance vestibular function. It's a bit like recalibrating your internal compass, making it sharper and more reliable. While we often take balance for granted, losing it even briefly reminds us of how deeply we rely on it. A stumble, a spin, a sudden shift in the ground beneath us all highlight how much this quiet sense does to stabilize our world. The vestibular system is a guardian of orientation, helping us feel grounded even when the world moves around us. Next time you tilt your head or step off a curb without incident, you can thank the little engineers in your ears. Sloshing fluid, tumbling crystals, and whispering nerve endings, working together to keep you from falling into the furniture. It's a marvel of biology, humming along unnoticed until something throws it off. And even then, it's trying its best to set you straight. Your muscles are chatty creatures, not in a loud or dramatic way, but with a constant stream of quiet updates to your brain. They're always sending little messages about stretch, pressure, and tension. Like coworkers who never take a break, reporting in from every joint, limb, and tendon. And whether you're lifting a cup of tea, reaching behind your back, or just adjusting your pillow, these messages help your body move smoothly, safely, and with a surprising amount of grace. At the center of this system are two remarkable types of sensors: muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs. They sound like characters from a biology-themed mystery novel, but they're actually your built-in movement monitors. Tiny, tucked away, and tirelessly diligent. Let's start with the muscle spindles. These are found inside your skeletal muscles, wrapped around the muscle fibers themselves. Their job is to detect changes in muscle length. Imagine you're reaching overhead to grab something off a shelf. As the muscle stretches, the spindle stretches too, and fires off signals to your spinal cord and brain saying, "Hey, we're getting longer over here." Your nervous system uses that information to coordinate movement, fine-tune control, and avoid overextension. This is part of what makes your movement so fluid. Your body doesn't just command a muscle to contract and hope for the best. It continuously checks in on how that muscle is behaving, like a live feedback loop. If a muscle is stretching too quickly, say you suddenly slip on a patch of ice, your muscle spindles trigger a reflex contraction to stop you from overextending or injuring yourself. This is the same principle behind the knee-jerk reaction tested at the doctor's office. A quick tap stretches the tendon, the spindle fires, and the leg kicks out automatically. Now enter the Golgi tendon organs, the muscle spindle's quieter cousins. These sensors are located where muscle meets tendon, and they specialize in detecting tension. How much force is being generated during a contraction? They're your internal strain gauges. When tension becomes too high, these organs can inhibit the muscle's activity, essentially telling it to take a break before things snap or tear. It's your body's way of enforcing a little self-care before injury strikes. Together, muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs form a kind of internal radar system. One monitors how long a muscle is getting, and the other checks how hard it's working. Between them, they provide moment information that allows your brain to coordinate everything from the graceful to the awkward. Without them, you'd be guessing how far your arm could stretch, or how much pressure you were applying to a doorknob, or whether you were pulling too hard on a stubborn draw. This constant flow of information also explains how your body knows when to stop. Let's say you're doing a forward bend, reaching toward your toes. As your hamstrings stretch, the muscle spindles notice the lengthening and let your brain know what's happening. Meanwhile, as the tension builds, The Golgi tendon organs weigh in with their assessment. If the stretch is slow and gentle, the brain gives the green light. But if you bounce too fast or push too hard, those same senses send a signal saying, let's not do something we'll regret. You ease off, perhaps instinctively, because your body is looking out for itself in real time. This relationship becomes especially interesting in activities like yoga. When you settle into a pose and breathe through a stretch, you're not just elongating muscles, you're gradually desensitizing those stretch receptors. The muscle spindles adapt to the new length, and the Golgi tendon organs become less alarmed. With consistent practice, this leads to improved flexibility, not because your muscles are being forced to change, but because your nervous system is learning to trust the process. You're essentially training your stretch senses to chill out. Body awareness, sometimes called kinesthetic sense, owes a great deal to this system of internal monitoring. It's the reason you can hold a steady pose, adjust your limbs in space, and sense when something feels just a little off. Think about balancing on one leg with your eyes closed. You're relying on constant feedback from your muscles and tendons to make micro-adjustments, maintain posture, and prevent tipping. It's a quiet ballet of tension and release governed by senses that never sleep. This sense also plays a role in strength training and physical therapy. When you lift weights, your muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs are watching every movement. If a muscle is under too much strain, the nervous system will reduce the force output to protect the tissue. Over time, with safe, gradual training, the threshold for that reflex adjusts, allowing you to lift heavier loads. Your muscles grow stronger, not just from effort, but from a recalibration of the senses that govern effort. And while these systems are generally automatic, you can develop a greater awareness of them through intentional movement. Dancers, gymnasts, martial artists, and athletes often talk about listening to their body. A poetic way of saying they've tuned into the internal dialogue of stretch, tension, and control. They know when a muscle is reaching its limit, when a joint is aligned just right, or when something feels subtly wrong. This intuition is built on thousands of hours of feedback, adjustment, and learning. Even without years of training, most people have an intuitive sense of muscle tension. We say we're holding stress in our shoulders or tight in the hips, and often we're right. Emotional states can influence muscle tone and vice versa. Anxiety may lead to a clenched jaw or raised shoulders. Calmness might soften the tension. These changes are not imagined. They're felt through real shifts in muscular activation picked up by those same stretch and tension sensors. Interestingly, people recovering from injuries often have to retrain this system. When pain or trauma alters movement patterns, the brain can start ignoring or misinterpreting signals from certain muscles. Physical therapists work to rebuild these pathways, reintroducing the brain to accurate stretch and tension feedback. It's like teaching a familiar language all over again. Some neurological conditions can disrupt this feedback loop entirely. For example, damage to the spinal cord or certain types of neuropathy can prevent stretch and tension signals from reaching the brain. The result is often a loss of coordination or difficulty performing even simple tasks, not because the muscles are weak, but because the brain isn't getting the data it needs to guide them. It's a stark reminder of how much we rely on these invisible systems. On a lighter note, this whole system is also the reason some stretches feel so satisfyingly good. When you reach your arms overhead and yawn, part of the pleasure comes from activating those muscle spindles in a gentle, controlled way. Your body likes being reminded of its full range, likes being stretched and moved and listened to. It's a quiet form of internal communication that says, I'm still here and everything's working. Even something as simple as changing positions in bed, rolling to one side, stretch, and in that conversation, there's a kind of quiet intelligence, one that you don't have to think about, but that's always there. Patient, responsive, and perfectly tuned to the art of moving through the world without falling apart. Pain doesn't exactly have the best reputation. It's rarely invited to parties, seldom appreciated in the moment, and usually gets lumped into the bad things we try to avoid category. But pain, for all its unpleasantness, is not just a feeling. It's a full-fledged sense. And just like sight, sound, or balance, it serves a vital function. Without it, life would be far more dangerous, far less manageable, and strangely dull. To call pain a sense is to acknowledge that it involves real sensory input transmitted through specialized pathways and interpreted by the brain. You feel pain when certain receptors in your body, called nociceptors, detect damage or the threat of damage. These receptors are scattered throughout your skin, muscles, joints, and even some internal organs. They don't care about temperature unless it's extreme. They don't care about pressure unless it's crushing. They are picky, but when they do respond, they're loud. Nociceptors come in different varieties, tuned to different kinds of trouble. Some respond to sharp injuries, others to burning heat or freezing cold, and still others to chemical signals that arise during inflammation. They send electrical impulses through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord and up into the brain, where the message is interpreted as ouch. This is not a vague emotional reaction. It's a highly specific alert system. Think of nociceptors as the smoke detectors of the body. You may not enjoy the alarm, but without it, you wouldn't know there was a fire. What's fascinating and sometimes frustrating is how flexible this system can be. Pain is not a fixed measurement. It's not like turning on a lamp where the light is either on or off. Pain is modulated by context, mood, attention, and previous experience. Two people can experience the same injury and report wildly different levels of pain. And even one person can experience the same injury in two different situations and feel more or less pain depending on stress, fatigue, or even expectation. There's a classic example of a soldier in combat who sustains a major injury but doesn't feel pain until after the battle. In the moment, the brain prioritizes survival over sensation. Later, when the danger is past, the pain arrives. This flexibility is one of pain's quirkiest features. It's not just about tissue damage. It's about how the brain interprets the threat. We often divide pain into two broad categories, acute and chronic. Acute pain is the kind you get when you stub your toe, burn your finger, or pull a muscle. It comes on suddenly, has a clear cause, and usually resolves once the injury heals. It's useful pain, the kind that keeps you from putting weight on a sprained ankle or reminds you to take it easy after surgery. In evolutionary terms, acute pain is a lifesaver. It encourages rest, caution, and healing. Chronic pain, on the other hand, is a more complicated guest. It sticks around long after the injury is gone or sometimes appears without any obvious cause at all. Chronic pain can last for weeks, months, or even years. It may be due to nerve damage, inflammation, or a malfunction in the way the brain processes signals. And unlike acute pain, chronic pain doesn't always serve a protective function. It can become its own condition, reshaping the brain's wiring and coloring every aspect of a person's life. One of the more peculiar aspects of pain is how inconsistently it behaves. A paper cut can feel like a medieval curse, while a broken bone might register as a dull ache. This mismatch has puzzled scientists and annoyed patients for centuries. Why does something so minor feel so dramatic? The answer lies partly in nerve density. The fingertips, lips, and face are loaded with sensory receptors, including nociceptors. That's why a tiny cut on your finger feels more intense than a larger injury elsewhere. It's also why kissing a scraped knee feels soothing. There are fewer pain receptors and more distraction in the act. Of course, pain isn't just a physical sensation. It has emotional layers too. Anyone who's ever been through heartbreak knows that the phrase emotional pain isn't just a poetic metaphor. Studies using brain scans have shown that the same regions activated by physical pain, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, are also involved in processing social rejection or grief. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between a sprained ankle and a devastating breakup. Pain is pain even if the source isn't visible. There are also rare and fascinating conditions where pain perception goes haywire. Take congenital insensitivity to pain, a genetic disorder in which people are born without the ability to feel pain. On the surface, it might sound like a superpower. No headaches, no stub toe agony, no discomfort at the dentist. But in reality, it's incredibly dangerous. Without pain as a guide, injuries go unnoticed and untreated. Children with this condition often suffer fractures, burns, and infections without realizing it. Pain may be unpleasant, but its absence is far worse. On the opposite end of the spectrum are conditions where pain is felt too intensely. One such disorder is called complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. Here, even a gentle touch can produce searing pain. The nerves become hypersensitive, and the pain system spirals into overdrive. These cases highlight how delicate and dynamic the pain system is. It's not a simple switch. It's more like a volume knob that can be turned up, down, or all the way to the wrong setting. Another fascinating pain oddity is phantom limb pain experienced by amputees who feel pain in a limb that no longer exists. The brain's map of the body doesn't always update with reality, and it continues to receive or generate pain signals from an area that's no longer physically present. This suggests that pain, while often triggered by the body, is ultimately created in the brain. This brain-centered view of pain opens the door to all kinds of treatments that don't rely solely on medication. Cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, physical therapy, and even virtual reality are being used to retrain the brain's pain pathways. If the brain can learn to feel pain, it can also learn in some cases to feel less of it. And now let's address one of life's great mysteries: why a paper cut can feel so offensively painful. While the emotional weight of a Monday morning might just make you sigh and carry on, the paper cut is immediate, sharp, and highly localized. Your sensory receptors scream with clarity. The dread of existential reflection, however, tends to be slower, foggier, and more polite in its arrival. Both are real, both hurt, but only one is solved with a Band-Aid and some dramatic sighing. It's worth noting, too, that pain is often socially expressed. A grimace, a wheeze, a groan. These are ways of communicating distress to others. Evolutionary biologists suggest that this visible expression of pain helps build empathy in social groups. If someone limps into the village with a spear through their foot, the face they're making signals to everyone, "I need help." We learn pain behaviors early and often. A scraped knee as a child earns a hug and a reassuring voice. A headache as an adult might get you a quiet room and a cup of tea if you're lucky. In the end, pain is a storyteller. It tells you when to stop, when to rest, when something needs attention. It's an ancient messenger with a very modern job. And while no one goes looking for it, pain is a reminder that you are a living, responsive, adaptable organism. That stubbed toe, that sore shoulder, even that paper cut, they're not just annoyances. They're signs that your senses are working, that your body is keeping watch, and that your brain is paying attention. Of all the hidden senses, pain is perhaps the loudest, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. It's not the villain. It's the alarm system, the guide, the teacher, albeit one with a slightly aggressive teaching style. There's something oddly satisfying about curling your hands around a warm mug on a cold day, or feeling that sharp, exhilarating jolt when your foot touches cool sheets at night. These are small, ordinary moments, but they're brought to life by a remarkable sense known as perception. The ability to feel temperature. It's not just about comfort or discomfort. It's a finely tuned system that helps your body navigate an ever-changing world of hot and cold. Theroception is what lets you detect heat and chill on your skin. But it also goes much deeper than that. It helps regulate your internal temperature, tells you when to seek shade or a blanket, and even plays a role in how you interpret pain. It may not be as flashy as vision or as lyrical as hearing, but without it, you'd struggle to survive more than a few hours in the real world. The science behind thermoception is both elegant and a little strange. It begins in the skin, which is dotted with specialized sensory receptors tuned specifically to changes in temperature. These receptors are part of a larger family of proteins called transient receptor potential channels, or TRP channels for short. Think of them as tiny molecular gatekeepers that open or close in response to specific stimuli. Some TRP channels respond to heat, others to cold, and some to things that feel hot or cold, even if they're not. For example, menthol from mint activates a cold-sensitive receptor called TRPM8, which is why mint makes your mouth feel cool. Capsaicin, the spicy compound in chili peppers, activates a heat-sensitive receptor called TRPV1, tricking your body into thinking it's been exposed to something hot. Your brain receives these chemical signals as if they were actual temperature changes, which is a bit like being fooled by a very convincing magician. These temperature-sensitive receptors send signals through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord and eventually up to the brain where they are interpreted as warmth or cold. But it's not just the surface of your skin that matters. Your brain also monitors core temperature deep inside the body using receptors in areas like the hypothalamus. This region acts as your internal thermostat, maintaining a stable operating temperature somewhere around 37 C. If things drift too far from this sweet spot, your body initiates automatic responses to bring it back into balance. Shivering to warm up, sweating to cool down. Interestingly, your body isn't equally sensitive all over. Some areas, like your hands, face, and feet, are more thermally responsive than others. These zones are packed with thermoreceptors because they're the most exposed parts of your body. Your hands are the scouts that test the temperature of objects. Your face is the forward guard that feels the wind chill first, and your feet, for better or worse, are often the first to complain when you walk barefoot on a cold floor. Ever wonder why your fingers and toes seem to freeze long before the rest of you feels truly cold? That's because your body is incredibly protective of its core. When exposed to cold, blood vessels in your extremities constrict to reduce heat loss. It's a survival mechanism designed to preserve warmth around vital organs like your heart, lungs, and brain. Your limbs become expendable heat radiators, while your torso gets VIP treatment. It's not exactly democratic, but evolution tends to prioritize function over fairness. This is also why your skin can sometimes lie to you about the temperature of things. If you've ever stepped from a hot shower into a cool room and felt absolutely frozen, even if the air wasn't that cold, it's because your skin was acclimated to the higher temperature. It's not just measuring the temperature of the environment. It's comparing it to what you were feeling just moments ago. Thermoception isn't absolute. It's relative. And the brain loves a good contrast. Thermoception plays a role in behavior too. It helps you decide what to wear, whether to seek shelter, and how long to stay in the sun. These might seem like small daily choices, but they're part of a much bigger evolutionary story. For early humans, detecting temperature changes could mean the difference between survival and hypothermia. A sudden drop in ambient temperature might signal an approaching storm, while excessive heat could warn of dehydration or heat stroke. Our ancestors didn't have thermometers, but their bodies came equipped with something better: a continuous internal weather report. And because we evolved outdoors, constantly exposed to the elements, our thermoceptive systems became incredibly sensitive. Even small changes in environmental temperature can cause noticeable shifts in how we feel. This sensitivity still serves us today, even though we spend most of our time in climate-controlled environments. A 2. Difference in room temperature can make you reach for a sweater or kick off your blanket without thinking twice. One of the more surprising roles of perception is its overlap with emotion. Feeling warm isn't just a physical sensation. It's also associated with comfort, safety, and affection. Psychologists have found that physical warmth can influence how we perceive social warmth. Holding a hot drink can actually make people feel more generous or trusting. On the flip side, feeling cold can lead to emotional distance or reduced empathy. It's as if our brains have linked physical and emotional climates in a kind of symbolic shortcut. Some people have altered thermoceptive abilities either due to genetics, injury, or neurological conditions. For example, individuals with certain forms of neuropathy might lose temperature sensitivity in their limbs, making them more prone to burns or frostbite. Others may be hypersensitive to temperature changes, reacting strongly to even mild variations. And in rare cases, the brain can misinterpret temperature signals entirely, leading to sensations of burning or freezing without any external cause, a condition known as thermal allodynia. There's also a curious link between thermoception and circadian rhythms. Your core body temperature naturally fluctuates throughout the day, usually dropping in the evening and rising in the morning. This dip in temperature helps signal that it's time to sleep, which is why a warm bath before bed can make it easier to drift off. The heat causes your blood vessels to expand, promoting a slight drop in core temperature afterward. Your body reads this as a cue to relax. It's a small trick of biology that doubles as a soothing bedtime ritual. Of course, thermoception isn't limited to humans. Many animals have specialized temperature detection systems. Snakes, for example, can see the heat signatures of prey using pit organs on their faces. Some fish detect subtle changes in water temperature to navigate or find food. Even bacteria can sense temperature gradients to move toward optimal environments. Across the tree of life, thermoception has evolved in wildly creative forms, each tailored to the needs of the organism. Back in the human world, we found ways to manipulate this sense for comfort and health. Heated blankets, cold compresses, cooling vests, infrared saunas, they all tap into our body's thermal response system. Cold therapy can reduce inflammation, while warmth can soothe muscle tension. Even spicy foods and peppermint candy rely on thermal illusions to create sensations that our brain reads as hot or cold. And yes, that's why eating a hot pepper can make you sweat. Capsaicin, the chemical responsible for the heat, binds to TRPV1 receptors in the mouth and tricks the brain into thinking your tongue is on fire. Your body responds the way it would to real heat by trying to cool down. The sweating, the runny nose, the slight panic, it's all a response to a very clever deception. Thermoception may not demand your attention the way a bright light or a sudden sound might, but it's always working behind the scenes. It keeps you safe, comfortable, and responsive to your environment. It helps you know when it's time to throw on a scarf, open a window, or enjoy that first warm sip of tea. It's easy to take it for granted, but feeling the world's temperature is one of the many quiet ways your body stays in sync with its surroundings. And in that daily dance between hot and cold, your senses are always a few steps ahead, guiding you with every breeze, every chill, and every cozy moment. Imagine waking up one morning and reaching for a glass of water with a hand that no longer exists. You feel your fingers close around the cool surface of the glass. You're certain your arm moved, but when you glance down, there's nothing there, just empty space. Welcome to the strange and fascinating world of phantom limb syndrome, where the brain's idea of your body doesn't quite match reality. Phantom limb syndrome is the name for the phenomenon in which amputees continue to feel sensations, sometimes even pain, in a limb that has been lost. It's surprisingly common. Estimates suggest that up to 90% of people who undergo limb amputation experience phantom sensations. And it's not just a fleeting illusion. These sensations can be detailed, vivid, and persistent. Some people feel an itch on a missing foot. Others sense pressure in a hand that's no longer attached. And for many, it's not just sensation. It's pain. Burning, tingling, cramping, pain radiating from a part of the body that's no longer there. To understand why this happens, we need to look at the brain's internal map of the body, what neuroscientists call the body schema. This map isn't etched in stone. It's flexible, constantly updated with sensory input from the body. But when a limb is removed, the map doesn't automatically erase it. The neurons responsible for that limb don't just go silent. They continue to fire, sometimes unpredictably, creating the illusion that the limb is still there. In a way, your brain is stubborn. It expects feedback from the missing limb, and when it doesn't get it, it fills in the blanks. It's a bit like a television with poor reception. It doesn't just go black. It produces static or strange patterns. Phantom limb sensations are the brain's version of static. Only the static feels very real. But the brain doesn't just passively hallucinate these sensations. It can get quite creative. Some people report feeling their phantom limb move in space or even change shape. There are cases where the phantom hand feels clenched tightly in a fist, causing intense discomfort. Others describe feeling their phantom foot twisted as an odd angle. These aren't random glitches. They're the result of a mismatch between the brain's motor commands and the lack of sensory feedback. When your brain tells your arm to move, it expects to feel movement in return through proprioception, stretch, and pressure. But when the limb is gone, there's no feedback. The brain interprets this absence in strange ways, often resulting in the sensation of a frozen or stuck limb. It's a sensory illusion built on a broken loop. This mismatch is a broader phenomenon in neuroscience. The brain relies on constant communication between its internal model of the body and the signals it receives from the outside world. When those signals are missing or altered, the brain does what it always does. It makes its best guess, and sometimes that guess is wrong in really fascinating ways. One of the most famous and innovative approaches to treating phantom limb pain is something called mirror therapy. It's deceptively simple. The person places their intact limb in front of a mirror so that it reflects where the missing limb would be. When they move their intact limb, the reflection gives the illusion that the missing limb is moving too. The brain sees the movement, believes the phantom is real, and amazingly often releases the tension or pain associated with it. This technique was pioneered by neuroscientist versus Ramachandran in the 1990s. He discovered that for many patients, watching the reflection of their healthy hand could trick the brain into thinking the phantom hand was unclenching, stretching, or relaxing. The result was often immediate relief from years of persistent pain. It was a powerful demonstration of how visual feedback can alter the brain's internal map and how flexible and trickable that map really is. The concept behind mirror therapy also reveals something fundamental about how we perceive our bodies. Our sense of self is a fusion of inputs, vision, touch, proprioception, and even expectation. When these inputs conflict, the brain chooses the most reliable or most convincing source. In the case of a mirror, vision tends to win. It's the loudest and most persuasive sense, especially when it offers a neat solution to a confusing problem. But phantom sensations aren't limited to amputees. There are cases of phantom breasts following mastectomy, phantom eyes after enucleation, and even phantom organs like a missing appendix still hurting years after its removal. The brain, once it learns to represent a body part, is reluctant to let it go. And sometimes it creates body parts that were never there to begin with. In rare cases, people born without limbs have reported experiencing phantom sensations in those limbs. They have no prior sensory input from that body part, no memories of movement or touch. Yet, they still feel as though the limb exists. This suggests that the body map in the brain isn't built entirely from experience. Some of it may be hardwired. On the flip side, there are conditions in which people feel that a healthy functioning limb doesn't belong to them. This is known as body integrity identity disorder. Individuals with this condition may be convinced that a leg or arm is not their own, even though it works perfectly well. They may even seek amputation to resolve the conflict. It's a chilling and poignant example of what happens when the brain's body schema goes airy. Even in the general population, sensory illusions reveal how easily the brain can be fooled. One well-known experiment is the rubber hand illusion. In this setup, a person places their real hand out of sight while a rubber hand is placed in front of them. Both the real and rubber hands are stroked simultaneously. After a few moments, the brain begins to adopt the rubber hand as its own. People will flinch when the rubber hand is threatened even though they know it's fake. It's not a magic trick. It's a demonstration of how vision and touch work together to shape the sense of ownership over a body part. This sense of ownership is not just an abstract idea. It's rooted in neural processes that link the body to the self. Your brain has to constantly ask, is this mine? And does this fit the map? When everything lines up, what you see, what you feel, what you expect feels right. When something's off, the brain tries to correct it. Sometimes those corrections are helpful. Other times they create illusions. Phantom limb syndrome and all the related sensory quirks that come with it remind us that the brain doesn't just receive information. It interprets it, guesses at it, and occasionally invents it. Sensation isn't a perfect mirror of reality. It's a narrative built from fragments of input and shaped by memory, belief, and expectation. The fact that a person can feel a hand that no longer exists or disown a hand that's perfectly healthy tells us a lot about the flexibility of the human brain. It's a master of adaptation, but also a master of illusion. It fills in blanks, patches holes, and rewrites the script when necessary. Most of the time, this works beautifully. But when the system goes rogue, it opens a door to some of the strangest experiences a person can have. The phantom in the brain isn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It's a reflection of the brain's commitment to consistency. It wants your body to make sense, even when the evidence disagrees. And if that means inventing a hand or rewriting a map or clinging to a feeling that no longer has a source, it will. 'Cause to the brain, coherence is everything. Even if it means believing in a limb that's long gone. There's a moment during exercise, whether you're climbing stairs, jogging around a block, or heroically carrying all your grocery bags in one trip, when your brain chimes in and says, that's enough. Not because your legs have stopped working or your heart has given up, but because you feel like you've reached a limit. That sensation, the internal gauge that measures how hard you're working, is part of a fascinating and often overlooked sense, the sense of effort. Unlike pain or temperature, effort doesn't always come with a sharp or dramatic signal. It's more of a whisper than a scream, but it's a whisper that governs everything from how you move to when you rest. This sense helps regulate your behavior, prevents overexertion, and perhaps most importantly, lets you make decisions about how to pace yourself. Effort is sometimes described as a blend of signals from the body and interpretations from the brain. It's both sensation and perception. On one hand, there's raw data, muscle stretching, oxygen level shifting, heart rate rising. On the other hand, there's your interpretation of those signals. This is getting hard. That interpretation is what influences your choices. For athletes, this sense of effort is a key part of performance. Whether someone is running a marathon or lifting weights at the gym, their brain is constantly assessing how sustainable the activity is. Push too hard, too fast, and the brain steps in with fatigue, forcing a slowdown. Pacing isn't just physical, it's mental. The body might technically be capable of more, but the sense of effort acts as a safety buffer, encouraging you to conserve energy, avoid injury, and maintain control. Interestingly, this buffer is not fixed. It changes based on experience, motivation, training, and even belief. Studies have shown that when athletes are given positive reinforcement, or when they believe they're capable of more, their perceived effort can decrease even when their output stays the same. The muscles are doing just as much work, but the brain is interpreting the experience differently. That means effort isn't just something that happens to you. It's something your brain partially constructs based on expectation and context. The technical term for this experience is the rating of perceived exertion, or RP. It's used widely in sports science to help individuals monitor their own physical output. Instead of relying purely on heart rate or calories burned, RP asks, how hard does this feel right now? It might sound subjective, but that's the whole point. Effort is about internal experience, not just external metrics. Even in everyday life, the sense of effort is always active. Walking up a hill feels harder than walking on flat ground. Not just because of physics, but because your brain processes the increased demand and updates your awareness accordingly. You don't need someone to tell you it's more difficult. You just know. And that knowing comes from integrating muscle feedback, oxygen demand, balance adjustments, and a long history of comparing experiences. This sense isn't limited to physical movement either. Think about speech. Talking for hours, especially in a loud environment, can feel exhausting. Your vocal cords tire, your breathing pattern shifts, and your brain starts flagging the activity as effortful. Teachers, public speakers, and singers are often highly attuned to the effort involved in speaking or projecting their voice. It's not about pain. It's about the growing sense of muscular and neurological strain. Even concentration can carry a similar signature. Mental fatigue and physical fatigue share overlapping pathways in the brain. After long periods of intense thinking or problem solving, people often describe themselves as tired even if they've been sitting still. That's because the brain, like any organ, uses energy. And when energy demand rises, your sense of effort kicks in, not just in the legs or arms, but in the mind itself. What's especially interesting is how the sense of effort works as a feedback loop. When you begin a task, your brain estimates how much energy it will take. As you continue, it updates that estimate based on real-time input. If you're well-fed, rested, and motivated, the task may feel easier than expected. But if you're hungry, tired, or emotionally drained, even simple activities might feel heavier. The same hill might look steeper. The same load might feel heavier. Your sense of effort is not just physical. It's contextual. This loop is also closely tied to motivation. If a reward is perceived as worthwhile, the same task may feel less effortful. A runner in a race may experience less fatigue in the final stretch simply because the finish line is in sight. Your brain recalibrates what is worth the effort in real time, adjusting how difficult the task feels based on how meaningful it is. This is partly why goal setting and mental framing are so powerful in athletic training and rehabilitation. When effort feels purposeful, it becomes more tolerable. In some cases, the sense of effort can misfire. People with chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, often report an intense sense of effort from even mild activities. Their muscles may not be damaged, and their hearts may be functioning well, but the internal perception of effort is greatly amplified. Similarly, in certain neurological or psychiatric conditions, effort may feel disproportionately high or low regardless of actual exertion. These cases remind us that effort isn't an objective number. It's a subjective experience influenced by a wide web of systems. And then there's the placebo effect. Simply believing that a task will be easier can reduce perceived effort. In one study, cyclists who were told they were riding faster than usual actually produced more power, even though they didn't feel like they were working harder. The body performed better simply because the brain believed it could. The placebo didn't make the task easier. It changed how the effort was interpreted. All of this points to an elegant truth. Effort is not just about energy output. It's a sense shaped by biology, experience, memory, and meaning. It's the reason you stop sprinting at the right moment, pace yourself during a long hike, or decide that carrying all the grocery bags in one go isn't that smart after all. And it's also the reason you might push yourself a little farther when you feel proud, excited, or determined. Effort is an internal compass, keeping your actions within the bounds of what your body and brain agree is sustainable. And like most internal compasses, it can be trained, recalibrated, or on occasion gently ignored, especially when you need to rise to a challenge. If you've ever told yourself just 5 more minutes during a workout or one more page while studying, you negotiated with your sense of effort. Sometimes you listen, sometimes you push through, but that negotiation, that quiet internal dialogue is always happening. So the next time you feel your legs getting heavy during a run or your shoulders sinking at the end of a long day, remember that what you're feeling isn't just tired muscles or mental fog. It's your nervous system checking in, reporting back, helping you decide when to press on and when to rest. It's the body's way of saying, we've done enough for now, or we could go a little further. And while it may not be the most glamorous of the senses, the sense of effort is one of the most human. It connects the physical and the psychological, the immediate and the long-term. It's the whisper that keeps you moving one step at a time through everything you do. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing perfectly still. You lift your arm in front of you, gently wave your hand, then lower it again. Simple, right? You didn't need to look. You didn't need to guess. And you didn't need to plan every second of the movement. Your body just knew what to do. But now imagine performing that same task without any internal sense of where your limbs are. No feedback from your muscles, no subtle tug from tendons, no information coming in from your joints or skin. Just empty space and a body you can't feel. This is the reality faced by people who lose their proprioceptive sense, the hidden internal GPS that tells you where your body is in space. When that system goes offline, the body becomes unfamiliar territory. Moving through the world begins to feel like floating in the dark with no map, no guide rope, and no reliable way to know what's happening below your neck. One of the most remarkable examples of this comes from the story of Ian Waterman, a British man whose experience has captivated neuroscientists, doctors, and philosophers alike. In his early 20s, Ian contracted a rare viral infection that attacked his nervous system. More specifically, it damaged the sensory nerves responsible for proprioception and touch, those critical signals that tell the brain where the body is and what it's doing. Curiously, his motor nerves remain intact, meaning he still had strength in his muscles. But without any sensory feedback, he had no idea where his limbs were unless he looked at them. When Ian first awoke after the illness, he felt as though he was paralyzed. He couldn't sit up, couldn't control his arms or legs, not because they were weak, but because he had lost the sense of ownership over them. He described the sensation as if his body had disappeared. His limbs were there technically, but they might as well have belonged to someone else. It was as though the lights had gone out in a room he used to know very well. Most of us operate with a seamless feedback loop between intention and movement. You think about walking, your body takes over, and you go. Ian's brain could still send commands to move, but it received no confirmation that the movement had happened. It was like trying to drive a car with the windows blacked out and no dashboard. You might press the gas, but you wouldn't know whether you were moving forward, backward, or straight into a wall. To function again, Ian had to rebuild his entire approach to movement. He began learning to control his body entirely through vision. If he could see a limb, he could guide it. If he looked away, all bets were off. Walking required constant visual monitoring of his legs and feet. If the lights were turned off, he would immediately fall. Everyday actions like picking up a cup or scratching an itch had to be studied, mapped out, and visually executed like choreography. His journey to regain independence was painstaking. He spent months learning how to sit, stand, and walk again, all using vision as a substitute for proprioception. What for most people is automatic. Reaching for a glass, opening a door, climbing stairs became a series of conscious, deliberate acts. His movements were stiff and mechanical at first, and only with time and practice did they regain some natural fluidity. And yet, against all odds, Ian succeeded. With relentless determination and an almost superhuman capacity for adaptation, he relearned how to live independently. He eventually walked, worked, and even danced again, albeit with a level of concentration most of U.S. reserved for brain surgery. He became, in a very literal sense, a self-made man, someone who rebuilt his sense of movement from scratch using only sight and willpower. His case has provided researchers with extraordinary insights into how the brain handles body awareness. It shows just how deeply we rely on sensory feedback to move through the world and how fragile that system can be when disrupted. It also highlights the brain's ability to rewire and adapt even in the face of massive sensory loss. Ian's condition is known clinically as large fiber sensory neuropathy. The large fibers in question are those that carry signals related to proprioception and touch. When these fibers are damaged or destroyed, whether by infection, trauma, or disease, the brain loses access to one of its most important feedback systems. Other conditions such as multiple sclerosis or certain spinal cord injuries can produce similar effects depending on which pathways are involved. When proprioception is compromised, balance often suffers too. That's because your vestibular system, which helps you detect head movement and orientation, works in tandem with proprioceptive input to keep you upright. Take away the sense of where your feet are, and standing becomes a wobbly, uncertain task. People with severe proprioceptive deficits often walk with a wide stance, keep their eyes fixed on their limbs, and struggle with coordination. Tasks that require fine motor control, like buttoning a shirt or writing, can feel nearly impossible without visual guidance. This is why people with such conditions often describe their experiences floating or disconnected. The body feels distant, unfamiliar, and sometimes even alien. Movement becomes abstract. You know intellectually that your arm is attached to your shoulder, but without sensation, it feels more like a puppet you're trying to control with your eyes and imagination. And yet, as Ian's story proves, the brain is astonishingly adaptable. In time, his visual system took over many of the roles once handled by proprioception. He developed a highly refined awareness of his limbs based on sight alone, even learning to anticipate and predict how movement should feel based purely on practice and muscle memory. This kind of compensation is rare but powerful, and it underscores how flexible the human nervous system really is. For those without such impairments, it's easy to forget how miraculous proprioception truly is. Every step you take involves hundreds of micro-adjustments based on stretch, tension, and position. You're constantly shifting weight, correcting your center of gravity, and aligning joints without needing to think about any of it. It's the background music of movement, always playing but rarely noticed. When that music stops, the silence is deafening. Movements that once felt natural become conscious calculations. Imagine trying to take a step without knowing where your foot is or reaching for something without feeling your arm move. Now imagine doing that for the rest of your life. The effort, the concentration, the sheer mental load is enormous. And yet many people with proprioceptive disorders find ways to adapt. They use tools, routines, and external cues to manage daily life. They rely on vision, touch, or even sound to substitute for lost feedback. Some use mobility aids to reduce the cognitive burden of movement. Others find creative workarounds like arranging furniture in predictable patterns or using auditory signals to help with coordination. These adaptations speak not just to the complexity of the nervous system, but to the resilience of the human spirit. When one pathway fails, others step in. When a sense disappears, the brain doesn't give up. It gets inventive. In a world filled with high-tech gadgets and smart devices, it's easy to overlook the most brilliant interface of all, your own body. The way you move through space without effort or thought is the result of a beautifully choreographed dance between the brain, the senses, and the muscles. And when one part of that dance falters, it reminds us just how much we rely on things we rarely notice. Ian Waterman's story is extraordinary, but it also holds a quiet lesson for the rest of us. That the simple act of walking across a room, reaching for a pen, or pouring a glass of water is not simple at all. It's a miracle of coordination, timing, and feedback. It's a performance your brain pulls off every day, invisibly, flawlessly, until the lights go out. And even then, if the story of Ian is any guide, the human brain will still try to find its way through the dark. There's something oddly comforting about knowing exactly where you end and the rest of the world begins. Your arms are your arms. Your face is your face. And when you wave at your reflection in a mirror, you feel completely certain that the moving image is you. This effortless sense of self, of being located somewhere inside your body, is something most of us take for granted. And yet this feeling is not as solid as it seems. In fact, it's surprisingly easy to trick. One of the most famous demonstrations of how fragile body ownership can be is the rubber hand illusion. In this experiment, a person sits with one hand hidden from view and a realistic-looking rubber hand placed in front of them. Both the real and fake hands are stroked simultaneously with a paintbrush in the same rhythm and direction. Within about a minute, something strange happens. The brain starts to adopt the rubber hand as its own. People begin to feel as though the fake hand is part of their body. Some even flinch if the rubber hand is threatened despite knowing full well it's not actually theirs. This illusion works because the brain is always trying to reconcile sensory information. It takes cues from vision, touch, and proprioception, your sense of body position, and uses them to build a coherent sense of what belongs to you. When visual input and tactile input align closely enough, the brain concludes, well, if I see the hand being touched and feel the touch at the same time, that must be my hand. Logic is easily overridden by synchronized brushing. This simple experiment opens the door to a strange world of body transfer illusions. In more advanced setups, researchers have used virtual reality to make people feel as though they inhabit entirely different bodies of different ages, races, or even species. In one study, participants wearing a VR headset could see through the eyes of a mannequin. After a few minutes of synchronized movement, they began to feel as though the mannequin's body was their own. Some reported disorientation when a mannequin was touched or harmed, as if their own body were at risk. These illusions reveal just how malleable the sense of body ownership really is. What we think of as our physical self is not just a static fact. It's a constantly updated mental model built from sensory input. Your brain is constantly pulling your eyes, your skin, your joints, and your internal organs to confirm in real time that you are where you think you are. And when that data changes or becomes ambiguous, your sense of self can shift with it. At the heart of this process are two major sensory systems, proprioception and interoception. Proprioception provides the map of your body in space, where your limbs are, how they're moving, and what they're doing. Interoception supplies the internal status report, how fast your heart is beating, whether you're breathing deeply, if your stomach is full, or your muscles are tense. Together, they create the feeling of being in a body and owning that body as your own. Imagine trying to feel like you without knowing where your hands are or how your lungs are moving. It would be disorienting at best, terrifying at worst. That's because these senses form the scaffolding of self-awareness. Without them, the boundary between me and not me begins to blur, and that line, as it turns out, is surprisingly easy to bend. In some clinical conditions, this sense of embodiment is disrupted entirely. People with depersonalization disorder, for example, often describe feeling detached from their bodies as if they're observing themselves from the outside. Their limbs may feel unfamiliar. Their face in the mirror might seem distant or unreal. It's not that they don't know intellectually who they are, but that their felt experience of self has come unmet. Other conditions, such as schizophrenia, can involve a breakdown in the boundaries of body ownership. Some individuals may feel that their movements are being controlled by an outside force, or that their thoughts are not their own. In rare cases, people experience a phenomenon called somatoparapherenia, in which they deny ownership of a limb entirely. That's not my arm, they might say of their perfectly healthy limb, and they truly believe it. These aren't metaphors. They're the result of real measurable changes in brain function. Neuroiming studies have shown that areas like the temporal parietal junction and the insular cortex play key roles in integrating sensory information into a cohesive body image. When those areas are disrupted, the boundaries of the self can dissolve, shift, or fragment. Even outside of clinical settings, we all experience temporary shifts in body awareness. Think about the way your leg feels after it falls asleep. It's still your leg, but it no longer feels like it's part of you. Or the disorienting sensation of watching a video of yourself and thinking, do I really sound like that? Your brain's self-model is always being updated, always testing new data against old expectations. Proprioception also plays a role in how we distinguish ourselves from others. Studies have shown that when people watch another person move in perfect sync with them, their sense of distinction between self and other can become blurred. In dance, martial arts, or synchronized activities, this merging can even feel euphoric. You momentarily dissolve into the rhythm, the group, the flow. And then there are those rare moments where your body surprises you, like catching a ball without thinking or stumbling and recovering in a single smooth motion. These moments remind us that the self is not always located in conscious thought. Sometimes it's in the automatic, the unplanned, the reflexive. Your body knows itself so well that it can act on your behalf before your brain has time to formulate a plan. You move, and only afterward do you realize how seamless that motion was. The feeling of being embodied, of being you, is not a single experience. It's a woven fabric of many threads. Movement, touch, internal rhythm, external cues, and a persistent behind-scenes belief that this body belongs to you. Most of the time, that fabric holds together beautifully. But when it frays even slightly, it reveals how delicately the self is stitched together. In philosophy and neuroscience alike, there's growing curiosity about what exactly the self is. Is it the body, the mind, the relationship between the two? The emerging consensus is that the self is not a thing, but a process, a dynamic construction that emerges from countless sensory signals integrated into a model that feels stable, even though it's always changing. Every time you catch a glimpse of your reflection, feel the breeze on your skin, or sense your heartbeat in your chest, you're reinforcing that model. You're confirming your presence in the world. You are quite literally sensing yourself into existence. And while your brain may be capable of being tricked by illusions or experiments, it's also remarkably good at recovering. Step away from the rubber hand, remove the headset, stand up, walk around, and within moments, the boundaries of your body reassert themselves. The world snaps back into place. The you that felt like it wandered off quietly returns to where it belongs. That's the beautiful tension at the heart of body ownership. It is both deeply stable and astonishingly fragile. It can be shaken by a simple experiment or rebuilt after a neurological storm. It can vanish in illness and reappear in recovery. And through it all, it keeps you grounded, giving you a sense of presence, of location, of being here now in this body. No other sense brings you home to yourself quite like the feeling of being you. And even when the lines blur, when the map becomes fuzzy or the signals contradict, the brain never stops trying to make sense of it all. Because at its core, the experience of being embodied is not just about where your body is. It's about where you are. You know the feeling. One moment you're going about your day, and the next something just feels off. You're shivering even though the room is warm. Your skin tingles, your limbs ache, and your favorite blanket suddenly becomes your best friend. Then comes the creeping suspicion. Do I have a fever? What's remarkable is that long before you pull out a thermometer or make a dramatic announcement about needing tea and sympathy, your body has already figured it out quietly, efficiently, and without asking your opinion. Your nervous system has picked up on tiny internal changes and adjusted its status report accordingly. This is interoception in action, your hidden sense of the internal world. And when it comes to temperature regulation, it's a highly skilled and always on duty operator. At the heart of this operation is a tiny but powerful region in your brain called the hypothalamus. Tucked deep inside the brain near the base, the hypothalamus is like mission control for homeostasis, the delicate balancing act that keeps your internal environment stable. From fluid balance to appetite, hormone levels to sleep rhythms, the hypothalamus is the unsung conductor of the body's physiological symphony. And one of its key roles is managing your core temperature. For most people, the body hums along around 37. See, that's not a static number. It fluctuates slightly throughout the day, rising in the late afternoon and dipping during the early hours of the morning. But overall, the body is remarkably good at keeping that temperature within a tight, comfortable range. It does this through an elegant system of thermoregulation that relies on continuous feedback from temperature-sensitive receptors located throughout your body, including your skin, spinal cord, and even your gut. These thermal sensors report back to the hypothalamus, which then coordinates responses to keep everything in equilibrium. If you're too hot, the hypothalamus sends out instructions to dilate blood vessels near the skin, increase sweat production, and reduce physical activity. If you're too cold, it tightens up blood vessels, triggers shivering, and may even make you feel a little sleepy to encourage rest and conservation of energy. But when your immune system detects an infection or inflammation, it sends chemical messengers called pyrogens to the brain. These pyrogens signal the hypothalamus to raise the body's temperature set point. It's a bit like adjusting the thermostat in your house from 22 to 25. Suddenly, even though your actual body temperature hasn't changed yet, your brain thinks you're too cold. This is when the chills start. You wrap yourself in blankets, turn up the heat, and your muscles begin to shiver. All because your body is working hard to meet the new artificially raised set point. You're not cold in the traditional sense. You're just being told to act like you are, so your temperature can climb to meet the new target. From the inside, it feels confusing. Why am I cold if I have a fever? But biologically, it's a brilliant adaptation. Fever is the body's way of creating an environment that's less friendly to bacteria and viruses. Many pathogens don't function well at elevated temperatures, so your body heats things up to give itself an edge. Once your temperature catches up to the new set point, the shivering stops. You settle into that strange flushed warmth of a full fever, where the skin feels hot to the touch, but the insides still feel oddly delicate. During this time, the hypothalamus is monitoring everything carefully, constantly deciding whether to increase or decrease the internal temperature based on feedback from thermoreceptors. These receptors aren't just sitting around waiting for emergencies. They're always working, even when you're feeling perfectly fine. They notice when your hands are too warm under the covers or when a cool breeze hits your neck. But they also report on deeper, more subtle shifts. For instance, when you exercise, your muscles generate heat. Your core temperature rises and the hypothalamus initiates sweat and increased blood flow to the skin to cool you down. You may not consciously notice all of this happening, but your interoceptive system does. And when something goes wrong, when infection or inflammation triggers a change in that thermostat, the brain responds in kind. You might feel fatigue, muscle aches, and malaise. These aren't just symptoms of being sick. They're part of a coordinated bodily strategy to conserve energy, rest, and allow your immune system to work. Your interoceptive awareness, your internal sense of being unwell, is part of the reason you decide to lie down, skip the errands, or drink hot tea in your pajamas instead of marching on with your day. Of course, fevers aren't just warm and cozy. Once your body has fought off the invading microbes, it resets the thermostat. Your hypothalamus lowers the set point back to normal. Suddenly, the internal environment feels too hot. That's when you start sweating. The body opens the floodgates literally to shed the excess heat. Blood vessels dilate, skin flushes, and your blanket suddenly feels like a sauna tent. You're not sick anymore. You're cooling down. And again, all of this is orchestrated behind the scenes by interoceptive processes and the quiet genius of the hypothalamus. Interestingly, some people are more sensitive to these internal changes than others. Highly interceptive individuals may detect the onset of a fever before a thermometer confirms it. They might sense subtle changes in their heartbeat, skin warmth, or fatigue levels. Others may only notice once the chills or aches arrive. Just like other senses, interception exists on a spectrum, and its clarity can vary based on attention, experience, or health status. In certain conditions, this sensitivity can become distorted. People with anxiety, for example, may misinterpret normal temperature fluctuations as signs of illness. A slightly warm forehead can trigger concern. A flush of heat can feel like a symptom rather than a harmless variation. It's a reminder that the interpretation of internal signals matters as much as the signals themselves. The brain isn't just reading the data, it's assigning meaning to it. Children are often less skilled at interpreting these cues, which is why they can suddenly spike high fevers without much warning or complaint. Their interceptive systems are still developing, and their immune responses tend to be more reactive. On the other end of the spectrum, older adults may have blunted fever responses, making it harder to detect infections. The sense of internal temperature is finely tuned. But like all sensory systems, it changes over time. And while we often rely on thermometers to confirm a fever, the subjective experience of temperature shift remains deeply meaningful. That moment of wrapping yourself in a blanket, noticing the shiver, or realizing that something's not quite right. Those are real sensory experiences. They're messages from the body to the brain saying, "We're adjusting things inside." Pay attention. Even animals exhibit signs of interceptive temperature awareness. Birds fluff their feathers. Dogs seek shade or curl into tight balls to conserve heat. These instinctive behaviors are rooted in the same biological principles that govern your own chills and sweats. Temperature isn't just something we feel on the skin. It's a deep internal rhythm that ties us to every living creature with a nervous system. At the end of the day, a fever might feel like an inconvenience, a reason to cancel plans, eat soup, and binge old movies. But it's also an elegant ancient defense mechanism. It's your body turning up the heat to fight back, all while letting your brain know what's going on through a subtle blend of chills, flushes, and fatigue. You don't need to understand every signal. Your body is already speaking the language fluently. All you have to do is listen. There's a reason we say things like gut feeling or butterflies in the stomach or my stomach's in knots. These aren't just poetic flourishes or emotional metaphors. They're echoes of something very real happening inside you. Your gut, it turns out, has opinions, and sometimes it's not afraid to share them. Tucked inside the winding walls of your intestines is a vast network of neurons, over 100 million of them, known as the enteric nervous system. That's more neurons than you'll find in the spinal cord. This hidden command center is so complex, so autonomous, and so eerily capable of independent decision-making that scientists often call it your second brain. But don't worry, it's not plotting a digestive coup. The enteric nervous system is busy enough just running the elaborate show of digestion, nutrient absorption, immune responses, and microbial management. What makes the gut truly fascinating, though, is how deeply it communicates with your actual brain. This isn't just a one-way message about whether you're full or hungry. It's a constant, intricate feedback loop running through a superhighway of nerves, chemicals, and hormonal signals. And at the heart of this communication is the vagus nerve, a long wandering bundle of fibers that connects the brainstem to major organs, including the heart, lungs, and of course the gut. The vagus nerve is like the friendly neighborhood mail carrier of your body's internal world. It picks up signals from your intestines about things like stretch, fullness, inflammation, or even microbial activity and delivers them straight to the brain. Meanwhile, your brain sends down its own memos adjusting gut motility, acid production, or enzyme secretion based on context. This brain-gut dialogue is always happening, whether you're aware of it or not. But sometimes you are aware of it. You feel anxious and suddenly your stomach churns. You're about to speak in public, and your intestines feel like they're reenacting a scene from a suspense thriller. You hear bad news, and your appetite vanishes without explanation. These reactions aren't accidents. They're the visible ripples of deep neural pathways lighting up. Anxiety, in particular, has a starring role in this drama. When you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, preparing you for a fight or flight response. That means less energy goes to non-essential systems like digestion. While blood is diverted to your muscles and heart, the gut slows down, contracts unpredictably, or becomes hypersensitive. This can result in nausea, cramps, urgency, or that strange fluttering we call butterflies. The emotional storm brewing in your brain doesn't stay confined to the skull. It echoes downward, altering the landscape of your gut in real time. The reverse is true, too. Gut signals can shape how you feel emotionally. The bacteria living in your intestines, the gut microbiome, aren't just along for the ride. They help break down food, produce vitamins, and even manufacture neurotransmitters like serotonin. In fact, around 90% of your body's serotonin is produced in the gut. That's the same molecule that helps regulate mood, appetite, and sleep. When the microbial balance in your intestine shifts, it can affect how much serotonin is made, how it's processed, and how your nervous system responds. Emerging research suggests that disruptions to the gut microbiome might contribute to mood disorders like depression and anxiety. It's not just about what you eat. It's about what those foods feed and how those tiny organisms in turn influence your neurochemistry. This isn't to say your gut bacteria are calling the emotional shots, but they are active participants in a much larger conversation about how you feel. Hunger, too, is more complex than we often give it credit for. It's not just a rumbling stomach or an empty feeling. It's an orchestra of signals involving blood sugar levels, hormone levels, mechanical stretch of the stomach wall, and feedback from the intestines. Hormones like ghrelin and leptin travel through the bloodstream and inform your brain whether to seek food or stop eating. But your gut also provides its own commentary. It evaluates not just how much food you've eaten, but what kind. High-fiber foods trigger stretch receptors more quickly. Sugars and fats can activate reward pathways. Sometimes your body says, "I'm full," but your brain still says, "I could go for a cookie." And then there's that other kind of hunger, the one that lives more in the mind than in the belly. Emotional eating, comfort, food cravings, or appetite loss during sadness all reflect the delicate interplay between brain and gut. If you've ever felt your appetite disappear during heartbreak or increase during boredom, that's the brain-gut axis doing its thing. It's not just about fuel. It's about feelings. Even immune responses in the gut can affect your emotional state. When the lining of the intestines becomes inflamed due to infection, food intolerance, or chronic conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, chemical messengers called cytokines are released. These can influence mood and fatigue through systemic effects, further reinforcing the connection between what happens in your belly and what happens in your head. But perhaps what's most fascinating is that the enteric nervous system can operate independently of the central nervous system. It doesn't need the brain's permission to do its job. It can control digestion, absorption, and local blood flow on its own. If your brain were temporarily unplugged, let's say for the purposes of some wildly improbable sci-fi scenario, your gut would still continue digesting lunch like nothing happened. Of course, your brain doesn't usually leave the scene. And when the two systems are in sync, life feels smoother. You eat, digest, and move through your day with a sense of physical and emotional balance. But when that rhythm falters due to stress, illness, or poor diet, the effects ripple in both directions. You might feel bloated and anxious or restless, nauseated, or simply out of tune with yourself. This is where practices like mindful eating, breath work, or even gut-focused therapies come into play. By calming the nervous system, often through the vagus nerve, you can influence digestion, reduce inflammation, and improve your emotional well-being. It's not magic, it's physiology. And while the science is still catching up to the full complexity of these systems, the early findings are both exciting and affirming. Your gut may not compose symphonies or write sonnets, but it does have its own kind of wisdom. It processes more than just food. It processes the world around you. It notices what you eat, how fast you eat it, and how you feel while doing so. It talks to your brain in whispers and waves, sometimes soothing, sometimes urgent. And it has a stake in your happiness, your decisions, and your sense of being well. So the next time your stomach flutters, twists, or grumbles in response to something you can't quite explain, know this. It might not be indigestion. It could be your second brain chiming in with a thought of its own. Not in words, but in sensations. Not in logic, but in instinct. And sometimes those gut feelings are worth listening to. Imagine waking up in a hospital bed after a stroke, unable to move your left arm. But instead of panic or confusion, you feel nothing unusual. In fact, you casually wave away the nurse's concerns and insist that your arm is just fine. Maybe it's a little tired. Maybe it's under the blanket, but paralyzed. Absolutely not. You might even try to stand up only to topple over, bewildered at how uncooperative your body seems to be. Welcome to the strange and baffling world of anosognosia. Anosognosia is a neurological condition in which a person is unaware of their own disability. It's not denial in the everyday emotional sense. It's not stubbornness or avoidance. It's a genuine inability to recognize that something fundamental has changed. A person with anosognosia can be completely paralyzed on one side of their body and still sincerely believe they can move just fine. No matter how much evidence is presented or how many falls they take, they may continue to insist everything is perfectly normal. This syndrome most typically arises after a stroke, especially when the stroke affects the right hemisphere of the brain. The right side is strongly involved in developing our internal representation of the body, particularly the left half of the body. When that region is injured, the brain can no longer properly register or update its awareness of what the body is doing. The outcome is a kind of sensory and cognitive blind spot, a disconnection between perception and reality. It's a difficult thing to wrap the mind around. How could someone not know that they can't move their arm? But anosognosia isn't a failure of intelligence or attention. It's a disruption in the feedback loop between sensation, motor control, and self-awareness. The body sends out a message. Hey, I'm not moving. But the brain never receives or processes it. In the absence of contradictory facts, the brain fills in the blanks with the assumption that everything is functioning as expected. There's something both eerie and fascinating about this. Anosognosia takes back the curtain on how much of our self-awareness rests on invisible automatic processes. We don't usually check in with our limbs to assure they're working. We merely assume they are, and that assumption is generally right. But when the brain circuitry is disturbed, the appearance of control can remain long after true control is lost. Patients with anosognosia typically come up with innovative reasons for their symptoms. If questioned why they aren't moving their left leg, they can respond it's resting. If prompted to clap their hands, they may bring the right hand over and pat the left, seeing the movement as a successful attempt. These aren't lies or purposeful fabrications. They're the brain's honest efforts to maintain coherence in a world where the normal rules no longer apply. In one documented example, a woman with complete paralysis on her left side was asked to raise her left arm. She boldly declared she had done so. When demonstrated that the arm had not moved, she looked temporarily bewildered, then said possibly someone had moved it without her seeing. Her certainty in her own action was not affected. It merely shifted to fit the new information. The brain, it seems, appreciates a coherent narrative even more than an accurate one. This is what makes anosognosia so potent from a scientific perspective. It offers an insight into the creation of awareness. The method the brain assembles a workable picture of reality utilizing limited and occasionally inaccurate information. The brain isn't only a passive receiver of sensory info. It's an active builder, constantly predicting, analyzing, and updating a model of the body and the world. And when that model becomes damaged or insufficient, it can lead to extremely bizarre experiences. In some circumstances, a nausea is accompanied by another strange illness termed somatoparaparaphrenia. In this condition, patients may not only dispute that a limb is theirs, they may argue that it belongs to someone else. "That's not my arm." One patient said it belongs to the doctor. "He left it here." Others have claimed the arm belongs to a sister, a roommate, or even a mannequin. Again, this isn't hallucination in the psychiatric sense. It's a genuine failure of body ownership, a sensory and cognitive defect in the map of self. These phenomena show the delicate tango between the physical body and the feeling of identity. We presume that because our body is always with us, our awareness of it is automatic and comprehensive. But Noya proves that awareness is a construction, one that can fall down under the right or wrong circumstances. Not all anosognosia entails physical paralysis. In various neurological and psychiatric diseases, individuals may lose awareness of cognitive deficiencies, memory loss, or emotional shifts. People with dementia may forget that they've forgotten something. Individuals with schizophrenia may be unaware of hallucinations or delusional thinking. In bipolar disorder, people in manic states may not realize that their behavior is risky or atypical. Across these examples, the basic issue is the same. The self-monitoring system of the brain is damaged. This doesn't make these persons less intelligent or less capable. In many situations, they remain articulate, smart, and deeply contemplative. But the system that alerts when something is off has gone quiet. The internal alarm bell no longer rings, and thus the mind proceeds as though everything is in functioning condition. That said, nausea can sometimes disappear over time, especially with therapy, feedback, and neuroplastic recovery. Some patients begin to identify their deficits after repeated experiences or guided reflection. Others never regain awareness. It's still a mystery why anosognosia resolves in some individuals and not others. What's evident, though, is that rehabilitation isn't only about physical function. It's also about restoring the ability to know what has changed. There's a delicate philosophical undertone to all of this. How much of who we are depends on the brain's ability to monitor itself. If your arm is paralyzed, but you don't know it, does it still impact your sense of self? If a part of your body no longer registers in your mental map, is it still truly yours in the experiencing sense? And perhaps most oddly, if we can be unaware of such a big loss, what else might we be ignorant to even now? Anosognosia compels us to confront the boundaries of consciousness, the gray zones where feeling and selfhood begin to unravel. It reminds us that awareness is not assured and that the eye who watches, moves, and thinks is perched atop a huge and complicated apparatus. Most of the time, such machinery functions smoothly. But every now and then it stumbles, and when it does, we gain a rare view inside the scaffolding that holds the self together. In its own unsettling manner, anosognosia teaches us something significant. It indicates that the mind is not a single cohesive entity, but a collection of systems operating together in harmony, or at least in agreement. When one of those systems falls silent, the illusion of completeness can continue like a drama running on without one of the actors. The narrative persists. The audience may not notice the absence until a narrative veers off course. So much of being human is about believing in the reality of ourselves. Believing that we know our bodies, our thoughts, our behaviors. Anosognosia doesn't just challenge that belief. It softly, hauntingly shows how much of it is contrived, and how surprising it is that most of the time it works at all. It's simple to imagine your senses acting as a set of independent tools. Vision doing its thing, touch doing its own, and balance quietly, keeping you upright from behind the scenes. But in reality, your senses are more like dancers in a well-rehearsed troupe. Individually graceful, certainly, but genuinely spectacular only when they move together. This dynamic is called multi-sensory integration, and it's what makes your perception of the world feel fluid, seamless, and delightfully real. Take something as easy as standing motionless. It doesn't seem like a team effort, but it's surprisingly collaborative. Your eyes provide visual proof that the room isn't spinning. Your inner ears, through the vestibular system, monitor head tilt and motion. Meanwhile, your feet convey pressure information through touch receptors, alerting your brain whether you're on a hard floor, a soft carpet, or slightly off balance. Your muscles and joints chime in too through proprioception, informing the brain on minor alterations in position. These inputs enter from multiple sources at somewhat different times, and yet your brain knits them together into a coherent experience. It filters out background noise, balances contradicting inputs, and makes judgment calls in milliseconds. You're not consciously aware of this synchronization. It's happening way below the surface. You simply feel like you're standing there, not falling over, and not particularly thinking about how incredible that is. The elegance of this procedure becomes more obvious when something goes wrong. If you've ever stood up too quickly in the dark and instantly felt dizzy, that's your brain working without all its usual resources. With eyesight removed out of the picture, your reliance on balance and body position becomes considerably larger. If your vestibular system is also feeling sluggish, perhaps from dehydration, lack of sleep, or an inner ear disease, you can sway, stumble, or feel disoriented. The world hasn't changed, but the sensory dance has lost its rhythm. Or consider strolling through a room full with mirrors. Your visual sense might get misled by reflections and deceptive depth cues. If your brain trusted vision alone, you'd probably walk directly into a pane of glass. But because your body can cross-reference with proprioception and touch how your legs are moving, where your feet land, you adjust. You hesitate. You survey the floor. You test with a toe. Your brain is checking with the full team before making a move. The interplay between senses is considerably more critical in increasingly complex actions. When you reach for a cup of tea, for example, you're using eyesight to find it, proprioception to aim your arm, and tactile feedback from your fingertips to alter your hold. If the cup is hotter than predicted, temperature sensors activate a fast reflex. If it's heavier than anticipated, muscle spindles instruct your grasp to tighten. All of this happens in a blink and frequently without conscious thinking. What's more astonishing is how adaptive the brain is when one of the senses is removed or altered. In cases of sensory replacement, other senses often step forward to fill the gap. People who are blind often have heightened sensitivity in touch and hearing. Their brains don't just try harder with the remaining senses. They actually reorganize themselves to process new forms of information in unique ways. For example, studies have revealed that when blind individuals read Braille, the region of the brain generally devoted to visual processing, the visual cortex, can light up. That suggests the brain is repurposing unused space to process tactile input. The mind doesn't just stay idle when one sense is offline. It looks around, grabs whatever tools it has left, and gets back to work. This adaptability has spawned a fascinating area of research in sensory prostheses and wearable technology. Devices have been created that allow users to hear colors through sound vibrations or see barriers by translating them into patterns of touch on the skin. These aren't science fiction gadgets. They're actual tools that help the brain receive and interpret sensory information in whole new ways. What's astonishing is that users of these devices typically report that over time the sensation begins to feel natural. At first, the vibrations or signals are puzzling. But after frequent use, the brain learns to assimilate them into the internal body map, almost as if a new sense has been created. It's not quite sight or touch or hearing, but something in between. A new dance move introduced to the repertory. Multi-sensory integration also plays a critical part in how we comprehend social cues, emotions, and even language. The famous Mgurk effect is a perfect example. If you watch a video of someone saying bail while the audio says goo, your brain may combine the two into dare. You're not masharing in the usual sense. Your brain is merging visual and oral facts to form a single interpretation. It's choosing the version of reality that feels most consistent across all inputs, even if it's technically inaccurate. This sensory collaboration can also be demonstrated in the phenomena of synesthesia, where stimulation of one sense involuntarily triggers another. Some people see colors when they hear music or associate specific flavors with words. While not usual, synesthesia illustrates exactly how intertwined the brain's sensory circuits actually are. In most of us, those linkages are subtle. In synthets, they glow like a disco ball. Even the simple act of enjoying a meal is a multi-sensory symphony. Taste, fragrance, texture, temperature, sound, and visual display all join together to define your experience. That crunchy chip, the scented swirl of cinnamon, the warm weight of a tablespoon of soup. None of these impressions live in isolation. They blend together into the moment, creating a fuller, richer sensation of what you're eating. And if you've ever had a cold and noticed food feeling dull, you felt what it's like when one dancer leaves the floor. There's something humbling in all this. We frequently think of ourselves as single observers experiencing the world through a clean set of discrete channels. But our actual experience is more like a hologram, a flawless blend of information stitched together by a brain that's continually bargaining, balancing, and translating. The real amazement isn't in each sense by itself, but in the orchestra they develop together. And what's more, that orchestra is flexible. It learns. It improvises. If one instrument falls silent, the others don't automatically cease playing. They rearrange the melody. That's not just sensory processing. That's resilience. That's the human brain showing off what it does best. Adapting to complexity, combining the scattered elements of the environment into something entire, something navigable, something that feels like home. It's a silent miracle, really. The way you walk, talk, reach, balance, taste, and turn, all without thinking about how it's occurring. The way your senses pass the baton from one to the next. The way your brain holds the choreography together. It's not just a dance. It's the dance of being alive. Imagine a small being living within your brain. Not a figurative voice or comic conscience, but an actual lumpy little creature stretched and squished in all the inappropriate areas. Big hands, large lips, absurdly little body. This bizarre organism is known as the smata sensory homunculus. And while he might not win any beauty contest, he's one of the most revealing depictions of how your brain evaluates your body. The homunculus is not an actual anatomical structure, of course. He's a map, a picture of how much space distinct bodily parts occupy in the brain sata sensory cortex. This region, located immediately behind the central sulcus in the parietal lobe, processes touch input from the body. But the manner this information is organized is everything but proportionate. In the brain, not all bodily parts are created equal. Areas like your hands, lips, face, and tongue are afforded a huge area of cortical territory, whereas larger but less sensitive portions like your back, thighs, or torso get significantly less space. That's why the homunculus has such strange proportions. He reflects the sensitivity of each location, not the size. Why do the hands and lips garner so much attention? Because they're filled with nerve endings and are responsible for highly fine-tuned jobs. Your fingertips can sense the texture of a particle of sand, distinguish the faint vibration of a buzzing phone, or manage a thread through a needle. Your lips and tongue help you speak, taste, kiss, and consume. These are high-priority zones for your brain's sensory input. So evolution allocated them extra neural resources. The homunculus isn't just nearly touch. There's also a motor variant, a deformed figure representing how much brain area is devoted to controlling different muscles. Unsurprisingly, the hands and mouth dominate that one too. Together, these maps reveal just how much of your mental real estate is spent dealing with the world through touch and movement. Now, here's where things become even more fascinating. The immunulus is not established. It's not carved in stone. It's plastic. Not in the Tupperware sense, but in the neurological sense. Your brain can change and restructure these maps over time through a process known as neuroplasticity. Say you lose a finger. The region of the brain that used to receive input from that finger doesn't go dark. Instead, nearby regions perhaps linked to the nearby fingers start to spread into the unused territory. Over time, the map changes. It redraws itself based on use, experience, and even injury. It's like an adaptive atlas that's constantly updating depending on traffic patterns. This similar idea occurs when a person learns a new ability that heavily involves a certain bodily area. Professional violinists, for instance, have been demonstrated to have an expanded cortical representation of their left-hand fingers. That's the hand used to press the strings with accuracy. Braille readers demonstrate expanded sensory maps for their fingertips. Dancers and sportsmen often have precise motor maps connected to their specialization. The brain rewards frequent use with more dedicated space. It's a typical example of use it or lose it, but inverted to utilize it and grow it. Even imagined movement can generate change. In investigations involving amputees or stroke patients, those who envisioned moving a missing or paralyzed limb commonly showed activation in the corresponding motor and sensory regions. The brain doesn't always require physical feedback to update its maps. It occasionally merely needs the purpose or imagination of movement. That's why therapies like mirror therapy, which mislead the brain into visualizing a missing limb, can occasionally assist minimize phantom limb pain or improve motor recovery. This flexibility is one of the most amazing properties of the human brain. It means we're never entirely hardwired. We're continuously in change, always revising our internal maps. And while we may not consciously perceive it happening every time we learn a new ability, heal from an injury, or discover a new texture, the homunculus softly shifts behind the scenes. The somatosensory cortex is also organized in a very specific way. It's topographically mapped. This means adjacent areas of the body are represented by neighboring neurons in the brain. So the hand is near the arm, which is at the shoulder, and so forth. This structure helps the brain handle tactile information in a coherent, spatially logical manner. It's like a neighborhood with each sensory region living on the same side of the street as its anatomical cousin. A fact, this topography sometimes leads to interesting phenomena. For example, with some persons who've lost a limb, stroking their face may generate sensations that feel like they're coming from the missing limb. This arises when the facial and limb areas are neighbors in the cortex, and when one is deprived of input, the other might extend into that vacant space. The homunculus also acts as a reminder of just how corporeal our sense of self actually is. We often think of awareness as something hovering behind the eyes distinct from the body. But the fundamental structure of our brain suggests otherwise. Our mental landscape is deeply anchored in bodily sensation. The body isn't only a vehicle. It's part of the mind's architecture. Even language reflects this entanglement. We say we have a gut feeling, heavy heart, or that anything feels good. These aren't just poetic phrases. They're indications of the way our brains transfer emotion and experience onto the body. Studies have demonstrated that emotions light up specific parts of the body in predictable patterns. Fear, for instance, likely to be felt in the chest and gut. Joy radiates through the chest and head. These patterns mirror how the brain encodes and accesses physiological feeling. What the homunculus shows us more than anything is that perception is not evenly distributed. Your experience of your body is not a democratic system. It's a biased, brilliantly optimized hierarchy. Your fingertips are sensory royalty. Your back more of a quiet backbencher. And that's okay. It reflects what we need to survive, communicate, and explore the world. There's also something curiously delightful about the image of the homunculus itself. This squat, bug-eyed character with big lips and flapping hands is an unusual mascot for neurology, but he's oddly lovable. He tells us that the brain doesn't worry about symmetry or elegance. It concerns about function. The portions that do more receive more. It's not always fair, but it is efficient. And while the homunculus may be a caricature, the science behind him is no joke. He symbolizes decades of research, brain mapping, and clinical monitoring. He's been a guide for neurosurgeons during difficult operations, a teaching tool in medical schools, and a metaphor of the brain's dynamic link with the body. So the next time you wonder at how swiftly your fingers dance over a keyboard or how your lips produce words without effort, remember those body pieces take up a lot of real estate upstairs. They've earned their space on the map. And whereas the homunculus may be odd-looking, he's a depiction of how passionately your brain loves your body down to every last twitch, tickle, and tap. Somewhere high above the forests of northern Europe, a small robin is finding its journey across continents. No GPS, no charts, just feeling in something else. Something silently astonishing. That robin, like many migrating birds, can feel the Earth's magnetic field. Not symbolically, but literally. It's termed magnetoreception and is one of the many secret senses that animals possess. Senses that transcend far beyond the five we tend to focus on in humans. In humans, we already know there's a lot more going on behind the scenes in sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. But animals, they're playing a totally distinct sensory game. Let's explore some of their hidden skills and what they reveal about how senses evolve to suit the surroundings a creature lives. Let's start with that magnetic feeling. Birds, especially migratory ones, have unique cells believed to contain microscopic crystals of magnetite, a naturally magnetic mineral. These crystals respond to Earth's magnetic field and help birds maintain their bearings even in utter darkness or dense cloud cover. There's also evidence that some birds may literally see magnetic fields layered onto their eyesight, potentially in shades of blue or yellow. Imagine flying through the skies and having an internal compass embedded right into your visual field. That's a level of built-in navigation even the best smartphones can't equal. But birds aren't alone in this. Sea turtles, salmon, and even some microorganisms show magnetic sensitivity. It helps them migrate, navigate, or align themselves to the surface of the Earth. The fact that such a sensitivity arose in so many unrelated organisms suggests that magnetoreception is not a quirky benefit. It's a powerful evolutionary advantage. The sole reason we don't notice it is because we never had much need for it. Now shift to the underbrush where a snake is coiled, silently waiting. Specifically, a pit viper. These snakes have infrared detecting holes between their eyes and nostrils, allowing them to detect the body heat of prey animals, even in total darkness. To them, warm-blooded organisms shine like small thermal lanterns. It's not precisely vision. It's a distinct thermal sense altogether. While we rely on nightlights and flashlights, snakes come equipped with a built-in heat camera. This heat detection is so sensitive that a pit viper can strike precisely at a mouse based just on its heat signature. Some beetles, too, have heat-sensing abilities, especially those that lay eggs near recently burned wood. They use this sensitivity to identify newly burnt trees, often from kilometers distant, by detecting the infrared heat still coming from the burnt bark. Then there's the aquatic domain where fish display even bizarre superpowers. Sharks and rays, for example, have electrical reception, the ability to perceive the small electric fields generated by the muscle contractions of other animals. This sensitivity allows them to pursue animals buried under sand or navigate muddy waterways when vision is worthless. The organs involved for this are called the ampullae of Lorenzini, which are essentially little gel-filled canals distributed around the head and snout. Other fish, similar to those in the carp family, rely on a lateral line system, a pressure-sensing network that runs down the sides of their bodies. It allows them to detect minor changes in water flow, the movements of neighboring fish, or the approach of predators. It's like having an invisible radar system, continually calibrated to the texture and vibration of the surroundings. Insects, too, have their own set of concealed sensory tricks. Moths may detect pheromones released by potential mates from kilometer distant. Some may even hear the echolocation clicks of bats and take evasive action mid-flight. Bees can sense UV patterns on blooms that are absolutely invisible to human eyes, marks that guide them straight to nectar. Even mammals get in on the sensory fiesta. Elephants can perceive seismic vibrations with their feet, essentially hearing distant sounds through the earth. Some studies suggest they may utilize this to detect thunderstorms, distant herds, or even incoming peril. Star-nosed moles, meanwhile, boast the most sensitive touch organ in the animal kingdom. A plump star-shaped nose bristling with over 25,000 sensory receptors. It allows them to find and consume prey faster than the human eye can blink. So, what do all these cases have in common? They indicate that senses aren't confined to just a handful of sorts. Evolution doesn't care about neat classifications. It cares about survival. If a new sensory tool helps an animal find food, avoid danger, or reproduce, then nature will discover a means to build it. And possibly most intriguingly, many of these animal senses aren't fully lost in humans. They're just cranked way down. Magnetoreception, for example, might exist in a basic form in humans. Some experiments evidence that individuals may have small unconscious responses to magnetic field variations. However, this remains controversial debated. Our skin has pressure receptors. Our eyes respond to diverse regions of the electromagnetic spectrum, and our ears can pick up vibrations beyond speech. We may just lack the tuning or amplification that other animals have perfected. This throws up an interesting philosophical topic. How much of the world is past us by absolutely unnoticed? If we had infrared eyes or electrosensitive fingertips, how different would reality feel? What would the night look like? What would the ocean sound like? Our perception of reality is restricted by our sensory window, like gazing at the universe through a keyhole. Other animals with their expanding suites of senses peer through wholly different keyholes and see a world that is lively in ways we can only fathom. In this light, the idea of higher senses becomes meaningless. A dog's nose is a miracle of detection, but it wouldn't assist much if you were attempting to identify ripe fruit in a forest. A bat's eloquizit in darkness, but meaningless under sunlight. Every animal is adapted to the demands of its niche, sculpted by stresses over millions of years to sense exactly what it needs to survive. Our own concealed senses like proprioception, balance, and interception are part of that same evolutionary toolset. They may not appear fancy compared to magnetic compasses or heat vision, but they help us daily second of the day. They keep us upright, centered, fed, cooled, and safe. They let us dance, run, rest, and cuddle. Just because they whisper instead of shout doesn't make them any less vital. In the end, evolution is not about showing off. It's about function. The robin doesn't brag about its magnetic map. The snake doesn't boast over its thermal scope. These skills are tools that have been sharpened by need and tested by time. They remind us that nature is always inventing quietly, effectively, and often in the most unexpected locations. So, while humans may never navigate by starlight or experience the heartbeat of a concealed mouse, we are part of the same sensory story. A story written across scales and species constituted in nerve endings and neurons. A story where every species, from the modest worm to the soaring falcon, carries the unique method of knowing the world. Picture this. You're sitting still, eyes closed, without doing anything dramatic, merely breathing. But then, as you settle, you begin to notice things. The rhythm of your breath, the gradual rise and fall of your chest, the quiet buzz of tension in your shoulders, or the way your stomach flutters as a notion comes. You're not suddenly psychic. You're just paying attention. What you're tuning into is something ancient and deeply human. Interception, the perception of the interior status of your body. And this is where meditation strolls in with bare feet and a quiet voice. Far from being solely a spiritual or mystical exercise, meditation, especially mindfulness-based meditation, is increasingly seen as a way to strengthen our internal senses. That's right. Sitting quietly and doing nothing can actually amplify your brain's awareness of what your body is doing. Let's talk about mindfulness. At its essence, it's the practice of bringing your complete attention to the present moment without judgment. That may sound straightforward enough, but the results are quite profound. When you sit and focus on your breath or feelings in your body, you're effectively transmitting a friendly invitation to your interoceptive system. Hey, you say, what's going on in there? In scientific words, mindfulness boosts the activity in areas of the brain connected to interoception, including the insular cortex. This region is like your body's radio tower. It receives internal sensory signals and helps interpret them. With practice, that signal becomes stronger and clearer. Studies employing brain imaging demonstrate that long-term meditators generally have increased gray matter density in the insula. That's right. Just by observing your breath, you're redesigning your intellect like a quiet little architect. One of the traditional mindfulness techniques is the body scan. This entails carefully moving your focus through the body part by part from top to toe, or vice versa. You don't move your body, you just notice it. Maybe your scalp feels tight. Your jaw can be tightened. Maybe your toes are cooler than you imagined. These little quiet observations are the cornerstone of interoceptive awareness. Interestingly, persons who consistently perform the body scan typically report feeling more at home in their own bodies. They're better at spotting early indicators of stress, illness, or tiredness. They become comfortable with their own internal rhythms like heartbeat, breath, or digestion without needing a doctor or a stethoscope. It's like upgrading your unique dashboard. Then there's breath tracking. Simple in theory. You just monitor your breath in and out like waves on a peaceful seashore. Not controlling it, just noting. This is additional entryway into interoception. Breathing is a unique physiological function because it's both automatic and voluntary. That makes it the perfect training environment for learning to feel what's ordinarily invisible. The more you note the breath, its rhythm, its depth, the little break between inhale and breath, the more you begin to notice everything else riding along with it. Emotions, for example, can have a direct impact on breath. Anxiety tends to shorten it. Calm spreads it out. Anger can hasten it. Sadness may make it hitch. By tracking your breath, you're often witnessing a real-time graph of your emotional state. Another crucial technique is grounding. This involves using your senses, especially tactile and proprioceptive input, to anchor your attention in the present moment. It might be feeling your feet against the floor, sensing the weight of your body on a chair, or examining how your hands lay on your lap. These physical indications are like bookmarks that say you are here. They pull the wandering mind back into the steady realm of the body. And this isn't just feel-good philosophy. It's measurable. Scientists have found that regular mindfulness training enhances heartbeat detecting accuracy. That's a test where you're instructed to silently count your own heartbeats without touching your pulse or utilizing an instrument. People who meditate regularly tend to get extremely good at this. Their brains are more keenly attuned to small internal cues. This has real-world implications. Interoceptive awareness is linked to emotional control. People who are more in tune with their emotional states are frequently better at managing stress, navigating tough emotions, and recognizing when they need to relax. It's like having a better user manual for your own system. Of course, like anything else, it takes practice. The first few times you try to meditate, you might simply notice how loud your brain is, a shopping list here, a reminiscence there, maybe a sudden need to redecorate your furniture. But over time, the noise relaxes, not because the thoughts disappear, but because you stop getting caught up in them. You become the observer rather than the reactor. And it's crucial to clarify this isn't about obtaining some Zen perfection or never getting stressed again. It's more like turning on a light in a dim room. You can't control everything you find, but you can see it more clearly. That clarity helps you respond with more kindness, patience, and wisdom, both to yourself and the world around you. There's also something poetic about the idea that silent attentiveness can transform perspective. In a world concerned with achieving more, traveling faster, and reaching further, meditation invites us to feel more. Go slowly and come closer, not outward but inward into the felt experience of being alive. In fact, there's an entire branch several study exploring how mindfulness practices could benefit persons with sensory problems, anxiety, chronic discomfort, or emotional imbalance. While it's not a miracle cure-all, it appears to assist many people reconnect with physical cues that have been muted, disregarded, or overloaded. For some, it's like being reintroduced to yourself. Interestingly, some traditions have done this kind of inner listening for thousands of years without needing MRI images to back them up. Yogis, monks, and mystics have historically described experiences of heightened bodily awareness, moments when the line between mind and body seems to disintegrate. Now, neuroscience is catching up, proving what old knowledge has hinted at all along. The body is not merely a passive shell, but an active participant in awareness. And you don't need to go on a silent retreat to feel this. Just a few minutes a day, checking in with your breath, noticing your posture, feeling the pulse in your fingers might begin to modify your awareness. Over time, those small moments of presence begin to collect like droplets filling a cup. The act of experiencing oneself, actually feeling yourself from the inside, is a gradual, subtle revolution. It doesn't look impressive on the exterior. You won't shine or levitate, but inwardly it can be transforming. You become less a bundle of thoughts and more an entire creature, breathing, experiencing, sensing, responding, fully human, totally here. So next time you discover a period of calm, whether you're seated in meditation or just sipping tea and watching your breath cloud a window, realize that there's a complete sensory world waiting inside. It doesn't shout. It doesn't flash, but it's always there, talking, guiding, keeping you connected to the calm miracle of being alive. Somewhere in a dimly lit nursery, a baby is flailing its arms in the air like a small symphony conductor. There's no audience, no music, only the wonderful mystery of its own moving limbs. It might not know what hand is or why it keeps coming up in front of its face, but it's interested. That moment, as ordinary as it seems, is a milestone. It marks the earliest flickers of proprioception and interception, our hidden senses beginning to come online. From the outside, it could seem like newborns are simply squirming and flopping wildly like warm, wobbling jelly beans. But every kick, every head thus, every disorganized attempt to roll over is part of a big internal exploration project. They're constructing a map of their own body pixel by pixel, experience by sensation. Let's start with proprioception. This is the sense that tells you where your body is in space without looking. Adults rely on it continuously, whether walking in the dark, typing without glancing at the keyboard, or scratching an itch on the back of the head. For a baby, however, this feeling isn't fully established at birth. They don't yet know how big they are, where their limbs are positioned, or how to move them smoothly, which is why their movements often look like someone learning to pilot a marionette for the first time. In the early weeks of life, newborns make jerky, spontaneous movements. They punch the air, kick their legs, and occasionally surprise themselves by touching their own face. These aren't just adorable moments for doting parents. They're vital training sessions for the nervous system. Every time a hand brushes a cheek or a toe kicks a blanket, the brain takes note. It says that sensation came from me. Over time, as the brain collects more information through movement and feedback, proprioception begins to stabilize. Babies start grasping for objects consciously, watching their hands with their gaze, and eventually learning that they can interact with the world. That dangling smartphone isn't simply lovely. It can be hit. And when it movements, that implies I did that. Now toss interception into the mix. The sense of what's going on within the body. Hunger, fullness, warmth, cold, weariness, the urge to stretch, the feeling of breathing. These internal cues are there from the very beginning. But it takes time for infants to interpret them clearly. A newborn could feel discomfort and cry, but not know whether they're hungry, gassy, or simply bored with their current blanket scenario. As their brain matures, people learn to correlate distinct internal states with consequences. This rumble in my gut goes gone after a feeding. This tightening in my diaper means I'll feel better after someone alters me. It's just trial and error, really. A baby's day is a continuous cycle of sensations, reactions, and learning. Even something as fundamental as rolling over is a sophisticated orchestration of muscle strength, spatial awareness, and sensory feedback. It usually happens anywhere between 4 and 6 months of age. And when it does, it's like a light bulb goes off. The newborn suddenly realizes that it may shift its position in space, that the world seems different from a different angle. That movement isn't just something that happens to them. It's something they can do. Then comes crawling, which includes not simply limbs, but a developing awareness of balance and coordination. Crawling is the huge boundary of spatial independence. It teaches babies how to shift their weight, control their direction, and negotiate obstacles. It also helps cement the bond between vision and movement, a sort of early multi-sensory integration. Proprioception and balance are seriously tested in this stage. That's why babies topple over so much. Their sense of balance is still growing. Their muscles are catching up, and their body map is still under creation. If adults have that amount of coordination, unpredictability, we'd never leave the couch. Interestingly, falling is key. Every fall generates feedback. That didn't work. The brain notes. Let's try something else. The cerebellum, the area of the brain that fine-tunes motor control, gets a solid workout. Over thousands of attempts, grabbing, crawling, wobbling, falling, the child's internal body map becomes more exact. Eventually, those early flails grow into confident steps, hand claps, and high fives. Somewhere around 18 months to 2 years of age, kids begin to display another astonishing milestone. Mirror self-recognition. This is often checked by putting a smudge of lipstick or a sticker on a toddler's forehead and placing them in front of a mirror. If the youngster touches their own forehead rather than the mirror, it suggests they recognize the reflection as themselves. This moment, seemingly simple, is profound. It reflects a developing sense of bodily ownership, the knowledge that this is me, that my body is not merely a thing among others, but a container for my experiences, my intentions, my feelings. Proprioception and interception are also crucial to this development. Without a reliable sense of one's own physical shape and interior states, that level of self-recognition would be practically impossible. It's no surprise that when these hidden senses are delayed or interrupted, development can be impaired. Some children with sensory processing problems or autistic spectrum illnesses may struggle with proprioceptive or interceptive integration. They could find it challenging to interpret their body signals appropriately, leading to clumsiness, discomfort, or difficulty with emotional regulation. But with assistance and sensory-rich settings, many youngsters can learn to navigate the world in their own unique ways. What's truly striking is how much of this early development happens without direct teaching. No one instructs a baby how to discover their needs. No one claims you'll feel a tightening in your gut when you are hungry. It all emerges via exploration, mobility, trial, and error. The body teaches itself slowly, brilliantly, and consistently. And it doesn't end in childhood. Even grown-ups continuing to enhance their body awareness throughout life through sports, dance, yoga, martial arts, or simply mastering a new physical skill. We keep updating that body map. Some of us develop more receptive to our interoceptive cues over time, learning how to listen when our body whispers about stress or exhaustion. Others need reminders to check in and reestablish that inner connection. In a way, our early years provide us the blueprint, but the editing continues for a lifetime. So, when you see a child wobbling around like a very small and exuberant pirate, know that beneath that lovely instability is a full symphony of sensations evolving in real time, a brain trying out how to survive inside a body learning what it is to move through space, and a mind softly growing around a realization: I am here. This is me. Take a calm moment and ask yourself, where do you end? Is it the edge of your skin, the tips of your fingers, the stretch of your breath? It's a rather slippery question. Most of the time, we go about our lives having a clear, uncontested sensation that we have a body, that the body is ours, and that this is where we begin and end. But when we actually sit and look that feeling, things get interesting. Because the feeling of having a self isn't just built from sight or sound. It's molded by a chorus of hidden senses operating quietly in the background. Your idea of self isn't fixed like a statue. It's more like a fragile hologram, constantly recreated from streams of sensory data. Proprioception tells you where your limbs are. Interception murmurs about your heartbeat, your stomach, your breath. Balance keeps you upright. Touch anchors you to the tangible world. All these inputs mingle into what feels like a one fluid experience. I am in here. This is me. But none of it is as solid as it seems. Consider the rubber hand illusion. A well-known experiment in psychology. A volunteer sits with one hand hidden out of view and a fake rubber hand placed in front of them. If both the real hand and the fake one are stroked concurrently, the brain begins to assimilate the rubber hand as part of the body. The volunteer may feel as if the rubber hand is their own, quiver when it's threatened, even report a shift in body temperature or ownership. Nothing has changed physically, yet the sensory clues were just persuasive enough to deceive the brain. That's the strength and fragility of embodiment. Your sense of self is flexible. It evolves based on what your senses tell you, and not just in labs. Imagine wearing virtual reality goggles and seeing yourself from behind, or losing your footing briefly in the dark. Or the unusual sense of waking up from a deep sleep and not knowing where your arms are. All of these situations remind us that bodily awareness is an ongoing development process, not a given. Even the barrier between body and world isn't always so clear. Take tools, for instance. If you use a walking stick or play an instrument, your brain immediately extends its proprioceptive map to include it. You feel through the tool as if it's temporarily part of you. This phenomenon, called tool embodiment, isn't merely poetic. It's measurable. Neural activity in the brain adjusts to incorporate the item as an extension of the body, which means that, functionally speaking, your idea of self is elastic. Philosophers and scientists have been gnawing on this for ages. René Dirt maintained a strong line between mind and body, famously proclaiming, "I think, therefore I am." But contemporary neuroscience indicates something considerably stranger. You feel, therefore you are. The raw, frequently unconscious impressions generated by your internal and external senses constitute the structure for consciousness itself. Interception plays a fairly major role here. Studies demonstrate that persons who are more in tune with their internal cues, like their heartbeat or breath, tend to have a more grounded, constant sense of self. They're also generally more emotionally attuned, better at understanding their own moods and reactions. In contrast, interruptions to interoceptive awareness can contribute to sensations of dissociation, anxiousness, or depersonalization. Those frightening moments when you feel divorced from your body, like a passenger in your own skin. It turns out that being embodied, actually feeling your body from the inside, is one of the cornerstones of feeling real. This brings us to an odd yet delightful concept. The body doesn't merely carry awareness. It helps produce it. Without all these concealed sensations feeding information into the system, there would be no map, no anchor, no place to be. You'd still have thoughts possibly, but no sensation of being someone experiencing them. Even illusions can educate us about this structure. In virtual reality, researchers have produced body-swapping experiences where people temporarily feel as if they've become someone else. With closely timed movements and visual signals, the brain buys into the new body. It's not permanent, of course, but it shows how changeable the concept of self truly is. Or take out of body experiences typically reported with trauma, excessive exhaustion, or certain neurological diseases. People describe flying above themselves, looking from afar, often with stunning clarity. These aren't indicators of the soul taking flight. They're likely malfunctions or rewirings in the brain's integration of sensory information. When the hidden senses can't agree on where you are, the mind improvises. It's eerie, but also revealing. The self is a fragile agreement among a dozen separate messages. Break the harmony, and the you take for granted starts to shimmer. And yet, what an incredible thing it is. This ever-changing, self-updating body map without looking. You know when your legs are crossed. You feel the weight of your body in the chair. You notice when your stomach growls or your heart speeds up. You're receiving messages from dozens of senses on the skin and in the joints and deep inside the organs and turning them into a cohesive, seamless feeling of me. This is what the hidden senses inform us. That selfhood isn't a luminous sphere in the brain or a fixed place in space. It's a process, a dialogue between the inside and the outside, a ballet of chemistry, physics, and perception. It changes as we develop, when we age, when we're injured, when we meditate, and when we dream. Some people recall moments of complete immersion while exercising, listening to music, praying, or even cleaning dishes. When the line between body and world relaxes, there's no narrator in the mind, just action, just sensation. The hidden senses are typically in charge during these moments, not acting solo but conducting softly in the background. So where do you end? Is it the edge of your skin? Or is it when sensation fades or where consciousness quits tracking? Maybe it's better to quit seeking for the edges. Maybe selfhood isn't a line but a field. Not anything that finishes, but something that blurs. An area of awareness molded by signals stretched by experience, softened by perception. You're not merely living in your body. You are your body. And your body, in turn, is not a container. It's a conversation. The hidden senses don't just help you survive. They help you exist. They whisper constantly, "You are here," not in coordinates, but in warmth, in weight, in balance, in breath, in the deep, peaceful understanding of being alive. Somewhere beneath your awareness, while you lie still and listen, a gentle orchestra is always playing. It hums in the background, faint and seamless, undetected unless you lean in and truly try to hear it. This isn't music made with strings or flutes. It's something much older. It's the constant pulse of your heartbeat, the soft pull of gravity, and the way you just know where your arms are without looking. It's the subtle shift in your breath as you slip into calm, the quiet tightening in your stomach when something's awry. The way your body sways slightly to keep you upright, even in sleep, is the symphony of the hidden senses. All throughout this voyage, we've studied the senses that don't usually gain center stage. Not sight, sound, taste, touch, or smell, but the others, the silent ones. Proprioception, the internal map that enables you to move gently. Interception, the primordial awareness of your heartbeat. Hunger, warmth, and breath. The balance preserved by your inner ear, the stretch felt in your tendons, the messages given from your gut, and the strange moments when those signals go quiet or go rogue and remind you just how intricate and fragile it all truly is. We've strolled through the brain's body map, watched babies create their sense of self, and looked into the odd realm of phantom limbs and rubber hands. We've looked at animals that detect the magnetic fields of the earth and thought about the boundaries, if any, between your body and your mind. And at each turn, what we've seen is this. Your experience of being alive is not merely painted by what you see or hear, but sculpted by what you feel deeply and continually, often without you recognizing it. These hidden senses are not just background noise. They are the foundation. They anchor you to your body, shape your emotions, lead your movements, and gently validate your presence. Every decision, every step, every pause to breathe is impacted by them. They form the felt texture of daily life, the peaceful understanding that you are here and how incredible it is to be put together from so many sensations. To walk upright, to sense hunger, to know your place in space, to experience the warm flush of a fever, the dizziness of a spin, or the calm clarity that comes from a deep exhale. None of these things come with flashing lights or loud pronouncements, but each one is a gentler reminder that your body is alive, listening, and speaking in a language older than words. And perhaps the most wonderful part is that it all happens without needing your attention. You don't have to remember to track your limbs when you walk. You don't need to intentionally balance when you stand. You don't have to check a gauge to know when you're cold or full or sleepy. Your body just knows. And that knowledge, silent, constant, and intelligent, is part of who you are. So as our calm voyage winds to a close, I invite you to dwell with that thought, nor to analyze it, nor to solve it, simply to feel it. Feel the steady rhythm of your breath. Notice the weight of your body on the bed or the couch or the floor. Tune in, if you can, to your heartbeat or the quiet hum of your own presence. You are here, and that in itself is wonderful. If you're still awake, hello again. I hope this delicate dive into the hidden realm of your senses brings you some interest, some tranquility, and maybe even a new way of observing yourself. And if you've already slipped into sleep, well, then your body is doing what it does best, tuning in, adjusting, and keeping you safe and still without fanfare. As we split for now, I'll ask again, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it by your clock or your stars? I always love knowing how far these words travel and how many peaceful chambers and drowsy minds they reach. If you've enjoyed this exploration, I would be so happy if you gave it a soft like, maybe even subscribing if you haven't already. It helps my small, quiet corner of the internet flourish and allows me to keep writing these science articles exclusively for you. But most of all, thank you for your time, your ears, your curiosity, and your breath. Whether you're completely awake or floating in dreams, may your senses hold you lovingly, and may your body always feel like home. Sleep peacefully, and good night.